Choi, a young promising guy, goes for an interview at a large corporation. On the way, he contacts his fiancée, who wishes him good luck. And then, suddenly, right before his eyes, a man crossing the street gets hit by a car and flies right under Choi's feet. The guy tries to help him, but the poor man dies in Choi's arms. This shocks Choi so much that he can't even answer basic questions during the interview, and naturally, he's turned down for the job. He spends the next 7 years searching for work, working as a laborer, waiter, and taxi driver to pay off his debts while his friends gain experience and create families. He sends out thousands of resumes, goes to interviews, and believes he'll find a good job. But time passes, and nothing changes. One day, he goes for an interview at the same corporation as 7 years ago. After reading his resume, listing various odd jobs, the manager notes the guy's persistence, numerous certificates, and licenses he's obtained. Choi leaves the interview hopeful, but then he's told that his investments have completely burned down. In a fit of despair, he rushes to the investor to confront him and ends up breaking his doors. The neighbors call the police, but it's too late. Choi voluntarily handed his money to a scammer. Distraught, he walks to his fiancée's house and sees her being dropped off by a man in a luxurious car. She notices Choi and offers him money for the time being. Upset, Choi asks his fiancée to forget him, as she shouldn't tie her life to such a failure, and he goes home. He finds all his belongings at the doorstep, as the apartment owner evicted him for non-payment. In the morning, he receives a message rejecting him from the job at the corporation. This finally drives Choi insane. He climbs to the rooftop, realizing that his life went awry on the day the man hit by the car died in his arms. Choi is no longer afraid of death. He takes a step forward and falls, and on the ledge, his phone rings, displaying his mother's name. Choi regains consciousness and darkness. Confused, he removes the blindfold and finds himself in a chair inside an airplane. An unknown face is displayed in the monitor. Suddenly, a girl appears, reading his last note. She announces that he's dead, but strongly disagrees that death is a way to end the pain. She transports Choi to a place where she intends to show him real suffering. They find themselves on a tall tower, with cries coming from below. She is the goddess of death and intends to punish him for insulting death. With those words, the girl throws Choi down and he falls into a horde of horrifying creatures in a sea of blood. He screams, fights off monsters, and he's back in the airplane cabin, facing the goddess of death. Choi learns that as punishment, he must die 12 times in different people's bodies. If he wants to avoid hell, he must try to survive in at least one of the given lives. Choi tries to object, but death disappears. The plane's engine starts shaking, and a terrified Choi puts on a life jacket, despite the flight attendant explaining that it's just turbulence. Soon, everything stabilizes. Choi looks around the plane's cabin and marvels at the expensive items. Then, an unfamiliar glowing object appears before him, containing memories and skills of the person whose body he now inhabits. Choi finds himself in the body of the second son of the owner of the corporation, where he was so eager to get a job. The guy realizes he can continue his life with all this wealth and agrees to live on. However, the plane's engine explodes. Choi manages to reach his seat and fastens his seatbelt as the flight attendant is carried away into a gap. The plane explodes and Choi dies in the flames. But immediately he's reborn in a vast dark space, facing a glowing door leading to hell. Death sits at a table, loading a gun with bullets that will kill him each time, allowing him to transfer to another body. The glowing stone he saw will provide him with memories and abilities of the person whose body he enters. Choi doesn't understand the rules of this game. How can he survive if all the other deaths are just as inexorable? But Death believes it's his problem now. If he doesn't survive, he'll end up in the hell she intends to show him. Choi sees a burning space filled with cries and pain, and cries himself for not understanding his guilt. And then Death confesses his guilt is that he arrived at death before she came to him, but he still has a chance not to go to hell. Death shoots, and Choi finds himself falling from a great height as a man. At first, he pleads for help, but then the glowing stone appears, and Choi realizes his new body is that of an extreme sportsman, agreed to make a parachuteless jump into a specially made net, televised worldwide. If he succeeds, the sponsor will pay him a huge sum. The glowing object penetrates penetrates Choi and endows him with the abilities of an athlete. The guy is confident that he can do it all. However, he crashes right in front of the net, shocking viewers worldwide. Choi finds himself on the brink of hell once again. He's outraged. He didn't have the slightest chance to survive. Then the guy starts recounting that he was born into a poor family, couldn't find a job, and lost his fiancée. He had nothing to hold on to. Death mocks his enumerated problems and shoots him in the head. Choi finds himself in the body of a teenager this time. He then sees one of his classmates watching a video of the crashed athlete and laughing at his death. A glowing stone appears, and Choi learns that he lives with his mother because his father died. The woman works hard to support her son, but he hates school because the class leader bullies him, and one day, after another beating, he decided to jump from the roof, and that's when Choi enters his body. Choi realizes that if he survives, he won't go to hell and can start over, but the class leader immediately reminds him to bring him some milk. He needs some milk! An indignant Choi grabs a chair and attacks the leader to teach him a lesson, but the leader's friends come to his aid. One of them, a tall, strong guy, beats up Choi, and no one comes to his rescue. During classes, Choi reflects on his situation and concludes that he first needs to gain the support of the strong guy. He returns home and, looking at the poor apartments, remembers his mother. He also grew up in poverty with a single mother who is now completely alone. Having dinner with another mother, he sees his own and cries from the pain of loss. In the evening, he receives a message demanding money from the class leader who constantly bullies Choi. The next day, Choi meets with the strong guy, and he explains that the class leader is friends with the strongest 11th grader, and he allows his henchmen to do whatever they want. During lunch, the leader again bullies Choi, and in front of the whole school, Choi pours noodles over his head. Shocked by such audacity, the leader orders the strong guy to catch Choi, but he suddenly refuses because he doesn't want to miss lunch. Realizing that no one is going to protect the leader, the others laugh at the now former leader. The strong guy remembers how Choi asked him not to interfere with what's about to happen. The former leader rushes to the 11th grader, who leads his gang to settle the matter. But upon seeing who his help was needed against, he's puzzled. Can't a schoolboy handle a little classmate on his own? Then why is he in his gang? The embarrassed former leader tries to attack Choi, but the strong guy steps in. The power of the foolish schoolboy has come to an end, and even his girlfriend prefers someone else now. Choi starts running to get stronger because he needs to be strong, and then, one evening, the former leader attacks him and kills him with a stone. Choi wakes up again on the brink of hell. He gets shot in the forehead and is reborn in a new body. He finds himself tied to a chair with a sack over his head. They torture him with water and then remove the bag, demanding to know where the girl and the money are. And when a hammer is raised above him, a glowing stone appears. Choi learns that he's in the body of a hitman. He once fell in love with the boss's girl, who asked him to help her escape. He hid the girl and the 10 billion won he stole from the boss and put in a secure place, but he got caught by the boss, and now the guy breaks free and attacks the thugs himself. He manages to turn off the lights and defeat the gang. Choi decides to find the stolen money, which he will use to start a new life. He opens the door and finds himself in a moving truck. Choi gets out on a motorcycle while the chase ensues. They corner him on a bridge, where he uses all of his skills to escape, causing a massive accident. Choi races through the night city on his motorcycle, but the pursuit doesn't let up. Then he enters a shopping mall, jumps into an elevator, and closes the doors before the pursuers can reach him. And when they finally catch up with him on the roof, he jumps straight into a pool. The boss orders to find the lucky guy, and he arrives at the pier, where a girl rushes into his arms, and when he tells her that the money is in the boat with lanterns, she shoots him. Choi finds himself at the gates of hell with a laughing death. But Choi is not so simple, because he didn't reveal the exact location of the money. In the next life, he hopes to find it. The guy dies and ends up in a prison cell. His friends warn him to behave well, or the murderer, a psychopath, will finish him off just 4 days before his release. Then, the psychopath enters this cell, and Choi recognizes him as the class leader who bullied classmates. Unable to contain himself, Choi attacks him. Others other inmates drag him away, and then a glowing stone appears. Choi's new body is that of a guy who dreamed of becoming an MMA fighter, but his mother got into debt, and the guy agreed to commit a crime for someone else's money. The fighter was still a minor, so he got a suspended sentence for running over a pedestrian. However, during the trial, the victim died, and the guy received a real 2-year sentence. When the real culprit's lawyer came to him, the fighter threatened to expose him and demanded more money, and now Choi is trying to get the schoolboy to admit that he's not a scary psycho murderer, but a pathetic teenage killer. The inmates, outraged by such lies, beat up the murderer. One day, during work in the workshop, a tragic accident occurs. While the guards take away the injured, the others arm themselves and, stating that Choi won't leave the prison alive, attack him. But the future champion of MMA scatters the attackers. At night, he catches the schoolboy making a shank, and to punish him, he pretends to see dead people, and now the victim of the schoolboy is standing behind him, saying that he will forever haunt his killer. The former, very gullible class leader experiences a mental breakdown. The day of release arrives. Choi meets the lawyer of the real culprit, who brings him additional money, but suddenly the guy refuses them because he intends to live honestly from now on. Later, he goes to the pier and finds the 10 billion won hidden by his past self. He brings them to a rented apartment and makes plans for the future. At night, he dreams of his mother and wakes up in tears, and then he receives a call from the mother of his new body. Choi promises to come. He divides the money into 2 parts, preparing one for the new mother and hides the other in a storage room at the station. Choi goes to the area where the fighter lived. He is attacked by a man with a knife, and Choi doesn't understand who wounded him. The man reminds him that he ran over his daughter with a car. The guy apologizes and confesses that another person committed the hit and run, and he took the blame for the money. The perplexed man stops when footsteps are heard and flees. It turns out that Choi's prison buddy caught up with him, but suddenly he confesses that he went to prison to kill the fighter and is now glad to have found him first because there is a reward for his head. The guy stabs Choi, who dies, regretting the money, and the phone rings, displaying the name of the mother. Choi finds himself before death again, but this time he cries, remembering his mother. Death is disappointed with his new failure, and he asks to be shot. In the next life, he finds himself in the body of a young guy, not far from the train station. Choi runs to the storage room and manages to retrieve the bag with the money at the very last moment. Then he sees a guy on a poster, and the appearing stone informs that the guy works as a model. Choi goes home and admires the expensive furniture. Then a call comes in, and a friend of the model reminds him of a party. Choi goes to the party and realizes that he can't handle alcohol because he gets drunk quick. Suddenly, the CEO of the corporation where he tried to get a job several times at appears, and Choi tries to get to know him, but then he completely indulges in the fun. He wakes up when his older brother wakes him up. It turns out they have a whole cafe to take care of, and when his brother leaves, Choi has to take responsibility for it, and on this day, he needs to work as a waiter. And then, at the cafe, enters his fiancée from his previous life, Ji-sil. The guy is completely speechless. He remembers how they met when the girl lost several pages of her first book, and he picked them up, and how he suggested they break up because he considered himself unworthy of her. And now, a new meeting. Choi's brother, noticing his awkwardness, informs him that the girl is a famous writer. Choi immediately Googles and learns that the girl's novel recently won a contest. It was dedicated to her favorite guy. Choi remembers the night before he jumped from the roof. Apparently, in that envelope was her prize money. Upset, the guy leaves to find the girl's book. As he reads it, he realizes that it was based on their shared experiences and events. He told her that no one would cherish her more than he did, and he promised never to let her go. Now, in the cafe, he remembers that he promised to give her a fountain pen after the publication of her book because, according to her, every true writer should have one. That evening, he secretly bought the pen and asked for it to be engraved, but he never gave it to her. Then, the man who he saw in front of her house that day approaches Ji-sil, but now he is with his family and calls the girl his sister. Choi realizes his mistake. The next day, he meets the girl with her favorite tea and asks for permission to tell her the idea of a new book. He tells the story of a person experiencing a series of deaths. The girl is amazed because he narrates everything so realistically. She asks for the hero's name, but instead, Choi asks for her autograph, and suddenly he sees the same pen in the girl's hands, which, it turns out, was given to her by Choi's mother. From that day on, he meets with her daily and told her what his supposed hero was going through. The girl was astonished because everything sounded so realistic, as if he were talking about a real person. One day, he gave the girl a red umbrella because it was raining outside. He returned to the cafe, where a waitress broke a glass, and he helped her clean up the shards and cut his hand. Then, police sirens sounded in the distance, and the girls who entered the cafe began talking about the accident victim. Choi rushed to the scene of the tragedy and saw the broken red umbrella. He started shouting when he saw Ji-soo standing across the street. The girl saw all of this and stayed to bandage his hand and talk. She understood that the guy was scared for someone dear. After all, she behaved the same way when she learned about her beloved's death. As a farewell, she says that she won't come anymore because his stories reminded her of her loss. Later, she goes to Choi's burial place and cries in front of his photograph, and Choi himself watches this from the sidelines. After waiting for the girl to leave, he approaches the shelf with urns, where Choi's mother finds him. He hears her crying and cries himself, trying to beg for forgiveness. Later, he writes a letter to Choi's mother, supposedly from Choi's friend, and puts it in the bag with the money, then gives it to the woman. The next day, he meets Ji-soo and tells her the continuation of his story. She finds it amazing, and she allows him to accompany her home. On the way, she hopes that his story will end well because she feels sorry for the main character. He remembers how once she introduced him to her colleagues, not caring that he was a waiter, as she considered him hardworking and handsome. She meant everything to him, but he never told her that. He thought she would cope with his death, and now he wants to apologize for not understanding her properly and admits that he will only ever love her. He blames himself for not realizing that there are people around who will cry and laugh with him in moments of disappointment and joy. He understands that nothing can be changed, but everything he told her happened to him. He got into this body by the will of the goddess of death, and he calls himself by his real name, Choi. But then, a car runs into them. With fading eyesight, he sees the director of the same corporation stepping out of the car, who is upset, with a broken bumper, and he remembers that in their lives, he had encountered this man more than once. It was he who was responsible for the airplane crash, eliminating his brother as a competitor in that way, and for running over the girl, and now he calmly kills Choi. Later, the police and doctors remove the consequences of the accident, and Choi comes to his senses on the brink of hell and promises to himself to destroy this scoundrel. And then, he grabs a gun and shoots the goddess of death. An amazing idea, excellent special effects, and a very deep meaning. And not in vain, according to many film critics, this series has become a real breakthrough in Korean cinema. Friends, I highly recommend watching it. At the moment, only 4 episodes have been released, and I'm eagerly awaiting the continuation. Hello everyone, today we'll be talking about a monster action film called Monster Truck. Be ready for some spoilers ahead. Somewhere in the wilderness of United States, a mining company called Terravax is trying to take out the oil that's underneath the entire area. The company owner, Tennyson, has come to the mining facility personally after receiving news from their head biologist, Jim, that their operation has run into some problems. Apparently, they encountered a large water deposit that's blocking their drills, which can possibly be harboring life, but Tennyson gives the order to go through the liquids anyways. However, when their cameras penetrate into the large reservoir, they quickly discover moving organisms inside the area, and the water begins to burst out from the immense pressure. The liquids rush out from the pumps and destroys all the equipment on site, while spitting out large creatures that crash lands onto the ground. The people are shocked to see the mysterious life forms and quickly try to capture them right away. They put the creatures into large containers, but their head of security, Mr. Bird, tells them that one of the animals is still missing. Tennyson wants the monster to be found immediately, as he doesn't want the entire operation to be shut down by the government due to the foreign creatures. The next day, while working on the new engine for his truck, a young man whose name is Coley hears a strange noise from the outside and decides to take a look in the junkyard. He walks into the piles of cars and sees the oil containers broken open. Suddenly, all the buckets are knocked over, causing the man to run away in fear as he rushes inside the garage and tries desperately to close the doors. He goes into the crawlspace to hide, but begins hearing a giant creature that's moving on top and sees a massive tentacle sliding inside the metal gates. Coley tries desperately to escape, not wanting to become a victim like the girls in those Japanese movies. He eventually manages to open the hatches and escapes outside, but not before locking the metal doors and preventing the monster from getting away. The man calls the police right away and notifies them about the creature that he saw, but when the officers opened the hatches, there was nothing inside except for the empty oil container. The senior officer, Rick, tells his friends to wait outside and begins scolding the young man immediately for what appears to be a prank. It turns out that the sheriff is actually the stepfather of Coley, and he thinks that this is nothing more than the boy's way of rebelling against him. After the man leaves in anger, the main character realizes that something is odd, as the monster only seems to be attracted to places that has oil. The next day, Coley takes a bunch of oil containers and places them inside the car crusher, while purposely spilling them onto the machine so that the monster would be lured here. He takes the controller and waits by the side, hoping that the creature would take the bait. Very soon, a bunch of tentacles appear behind the car crusher, and a giant creature crawls onto the platform. The monster grabs onto the oil container as it lies down like Winnie the Pooh, and Coley is surprised to see that the creature seems to be very harmless. The man goes closer towards the animal as it drinks all the oil like it was made from honey, and not noticing the human's presence at all. Coley watches the creature intriguingly, but the monster is frightened by his sudden appearance, causing the man to break the controller and turning on the machine as a result. Coley tries to fix the remote, but nothing seems to be responding as the car crusher begins to drop onto the unsuspecting creature. With no other choice, the man runs towards the monster and begins pulling its giant tentacle while trying to save the innocent animal. The machine continues to crush down into the creature, but Coley manages to pull out the giant monster just in time before it gets turned into a massive pancake. The monster looks at the human in anger and grabs onto Coley before roaring furiously at the man, but quickly notices what happened to all the containers and realizes that it was saved. The man runs away from the monster right away as the creature lies back down like a couch potato, and Coley realizes that it's barely able to move on land. He yells at the giant squid to not eat him, which the creature seems to understand, before he grabs the oil container and begins feeding the monster to gain its trust. On the other side, Tennyson's henchmen have arrived inside the police station to inquire about any strange calls. Despite the sheriff telling his men to not say anything, one of the officers reveals that a prank call regarding a large animal came from the junkyard that Coley works in. At the same time, the main character puts the giant creature onto a large dolly so that he can drag it to the police station to prove his innocence. However, when he comes back with the truck, the monster is already gone as it uses the dolly like a wheelchair while chasing after the dog. Coley runs towards the creature and tries to stop it by dragging on the rope, but the monster notices this and easily throws the main character away like a rag doll. The man gets up and tries to stop the giant squid, but the creature is already gone as it begins to head towards the garage. Coley chases after the monster right away, but suddenly, a bright light shines towards him from behind as two large vehicles arrive into the junkyard. It turns out that Burke has decided to pay Coley a visit, demanding to know what the main character saw last night. The man lies about the encounter to protect the creature, but Tennyson's henchmen forces themselves into the garage. Luckily, the monster seems to be nowhere in sight, but Coley quickly realizes that the creature is hiding inside his truck. He tries desperately to hide the animal's tentacles while distracting Burke and his man, claiming that he heard a noise coming from the opposite side of the junkyard. His plan quickly backfires when the monster begins moving the truck towards the people, while Coley tries to stop the vehicle right away. Luckily, he's able to fool the people by pretending to push the car and manages to get away from the garage without being suspicious. His problems are not over yet, as the monster does not seem to listen to him no matter what he says, which forces the man to faceplant right onto the ground. Things become even worse when his friend Meredith comes to visit him for a study session, and he realizes that it's too late to pretend to do push-ups to save his dignity. He tries to make the woman leave, but this only angers her as she came all the way here to study for his convenience. Their arguments are interrupted by the roar of the monster, which immediately alerts the henchmen to their location. With no other choice, Cody decides to push the girl into his truck and pray that the creature would start the vehicle and run it without killing them both. Luckily, the monster begins moving the truck away from the people, while the man holds onto the steering wheel like his life depends on it. Things quickly go wrong when their vehicle jumps off the road and bounces on the hills, as the monster is having the time of his life and giving the riders a near-death experience. The creature is able to dodge all the trees while jumping over the ground and waving his tentacles, eventually making it towards the grass field in one piece. The man rushes out immediately and screams at the vehicle in anger, which only manages to confuse the woman even more. Cody realizes how bizarre it is to explain what's going on and decides to show the woman by telling her to look under the car. Meredith peeks inside the vehicle and sees the monster, causing her to fall down while screaming in fear and managing to scare the creature at the same time. The woman has a hard time believing what she just witnessed, but Cody assures her that the animal is harmless. The man brings the girl back to her home alongside the monster, which refuses to leave the truck. With no other choice, Cody decides to take out the giant squid by force, as the creature never seems to behave while inside the vehicle. However, the man quickly discovers that the animal actually stops moving when it can't see what's in front of it, which gives him a bold idea of doing something completely different. He begins modifying the truck by considering the creature inside and designs the blinds for the monster so that he may control the speed. As he continues to work on the vehicle, he discovers the mechanism to which the animal is using to turn the axle and decides to use it as a way to power the entire truck. The next morning, the girl goes into the barn and is surprised to see that Cody has kept the creature inside his ride, even naming the monster Creech. The man enters the truck to go for a test drive, and the monster begins running the vehicle like a real engine as it races down the hills, but also adding a flavor of personality as well. However, the girl thinks that they shouldn't keep the creature forever, as the animal must be missing its home by now. Cody has a hard time believing this as he takes numerous selfies alongside his new friend, but eventually agrees that they have a responsibility of returning the animal home. The man decides to bring the creature towards his biological father, who turns out to be one of the miners working for Terravax. They go towards the gas station to fill up, but Cody has trouble figuring out where the petroleum goes as he doesn't want to put it in the wrong hole. Things become even worse when Cody's rich classmate drives in as well, and the man mocks the main character for having such a broken truck. Their attitude changes quickly when they hear the revving from the main character's vehicle as it charges onto the road like a sports car. However, Cody feels that something is wrong as Creech begins driving chaotically across the traffic like a preschooler who ate too much sugar. Meredith quickly realizes that it must be due to the gasoline that Cody gave to the monster, which contains a ton of chemicals inside. They rush across the highway like a maniac and cuts across the traffic while running into other cars. The squid monster tries to take over the vehicle by using its giant tentacles, which makes the girl extremely nervous as she begins breathing like she's having childbirth. The vehicle rushes into a second-hand dealership where the salesman is trying to scam the elderly, but gets a moment of instant karma as their truck runs over all the cars. They crash into a van that's filled by paint while turning the salesman into a clown, and they're able to disappear before the police officers arrive. The two makes it towards the mining site of Terravax, and Cody goes to greet his dad, who he hasn't seen for a long time. The man takes them into his trailer while explaining to them exactly what he saw on the night, and Cody realizes that Creech must have came from underground. Before the man can tell his father about the creature, he quickly finds out that his old man has betrayed them to the company by calling the security. The conflict immediately becomes physical when Burke tries to take away the main character by force, but this greatly angers the squid monster as it begins revving the truck. Cody takes the chance to break free and tells the girl to get onto the vehicle, while Creech begins spinning the truck across the field. Burke realizes that the monster is hiding inside the automobile, as all his men are trying to grab onto the vehicle. Cody manages to get back onto the truck, and he decides to go straight towards his father's trailer as he rips the building into pieces. They head towards the exit right away, but not before running into the sheriff, who is shocked to see his stepson creating trouble once again as all the security chases after them. Cody rushes towards the downtown streets while Burke and his team follow closely behind, and the man decides to lose the pursuers by going inside a small alleyway. He manages to jump over the obstacles by using his new contraptions, causing Burke to crash into a garbage bin as they rush off towards the exit. Before they can escape the area, Cody quickly runs into his stepfather, who begins pursuing him as well. The man has no choice but to run away once again as he drives inside a small street, but when the officer arrives inside, he's surprised to see that his stepson has disappeared already. What he doesn't realize is that Cody is hiding above his car by climbing the walls like Jackie Chan and managing to trick the man into leaving the area. However, the chase is not over yet, as they're quickly discovered by Burke once again, forcing them to run into a dead end as the man pursues them closely behind. Luckily, Cody is able to use the truck's upgrades, which opens up the sides, allowing the giant monster to climb onto the building, while Burke looks at them in disbelief. They begin to drive across the roof and jumping over the windows, while completely ignoring the laws of physics at the same time. The two eventually makes it back down onto the roads as Cody tries desperately to get away, but only to find out that the enemies are right behind them. The main character rushes towards the nearest train track while the massive train is approaching the intersection, as he plans to lose the pursuers like he was in Fast and Furious. He rushes towards the railway like he was Dom Toretto while living his life a quarter mile at a time, and he manages to jump over the train's cargo as he lands on the other side. Cody celebrates his victory by doing donuts on the road and leaving all the people behind in the dust. They make it towards a cabin that belongs to the girl's father and decides to use the location as a safe house for now, while Cody thanks the creature for saving his life. At night, while relaxing by the campfire, the main character talks about his disappointment in his father. The girl assures him that this is okay, as he wouldn't be the awesome person that he is today if his father wasn't so awful. Cody smiles at the girl for the comforting words while he goes inside the truck to cry alone. Surprisingly, the giant monster tries to comfort the man by using its tentacles and proceeds to drive him towards the lake before jumping into the water. Cody is shocked to see that the creature is glowing brightly while swimming inside the lake, and he thanks Creech for helping him this whole time while promising to bring the monster home. At the same time, Jim is beginning to experiment on the creatures that he captured and shows Tennyson that the animals are very intelligent as they can learn like a hive mind. However, the man is not interested in this as he only cares about his profits in the mining operation. He plans to put poison into the underground water system to kill all the monsters and blackmails the scientists to be part of this operation. The creature seems to understand that their life is in danger and begins to cry out for help, and this causes Creech to pick up on their location as he starts hearing their voices. The next morning, Cody notices that the monster has disappeared alongside his truck and wonders why the creature decided to run away. Luckily, the main character left his phone in the vehicle, and the girl is able to track the monster's location by using her mobile device. They chase after the truck immediately and is shocked to see that Creech has decided to go to the headquarters of Terravax. The two sneaks into the back door and sees that the truck is in the yard, but the monster is nowhere inside. They decide to go into the building and eventually makes it towards the basement, where they enter into a laboratory and sees two giant containers with tentacle monsters inside. Suddenly, they begin hearing something knocking from the outside wall and realizes that Creech is trying to break in to save his friends. However, this quickly alerts the security guards and they charge inside to shoot the monster with tranquilizers, eventually managing to knock out the creature as it falls towards the ground. Cody looks hopelessly at the monster as he's taken away by the guards, and they finally meet Tennyson in the office, who forcefully deletes all their photos of the creature. The man threatens the main character to leave this alone before telling his security guard to take the students away. As they're about to leave the building, their escort is interrupted by Jim, who takes them away on the pretense of Tennyson's order. The scientist tells them in secret that he won't allow his boss to kill the entire species for the man's greed, and promises that he'll do everything to help their cause. Realizing that they need more vehicles to rescue the monsters, Cody secretly goes towards his classmate's home and takes the truck while the man is too busy playing video games. The girlfriend sees this and walks towards the window, but makes no effort to warn her boyfriend, clearly showing that money will never buy true love. However, the people still need another truck for the other monster, and Cody decides to pay his friend Sam a visit. It turns out that the boy's father owns a large car dealership, and he's more than happy to help the main character after learning about the monsters. Cody takes one of their best-looking trucks and begins modifying the vehicle for the creatures, and by all working together, they're finally able to finish the upgrades by morning. At the same time, Jim watches carefully as the workers load the monsters onto the semi-truck, and the man takes the chance to hijack the vehicle away from the driver. The scientist brings the creatures inside the car dealership, and they're finally able to release the squid monsters from the plastic containers. Cody is exhilarated to see his friend once again, and Creech goes towards the other tentacle monsters and embraces them in happiness. It turns out that the creatures are actually a family that was separated due to the mining operation, and the people are glad to see that the monsters are reunited. Very soon, the giant creatures go into their trucks as the people plan to bring the tentacle monsters back to their home. They head towards the mining site by going off-road, but Berg and his men are quickly able to find their location and catch up towards their trucks. The enemies begin surrounding the people and trying to box them in while shooting at Jim's vehicle. Luckily, the girl is able to interfere by pushing her friend away and grabbing onto the enemy trucks while flipping them into the air, which disables the shooters right away. Cody realizes that they can't outrun the pursuers on the empty fields and begins luring the enemies into a dense forest. They're able to dodge the incoming obstacles thanks to the monsters and jumping over the trees by using their springs. Meanwhile, the sheriff has received news about the pursuing trucks and decides to go there immediately. The man rushes towards the area only to see that his stepson is being chased by Tennyson's henchmen once again, forcing the officer to rush onto the hills and try to stop this chaos. However, the man quickly crashes into Berg and severely damaging his vehicle. The enemy takes the chance and begins pushing the police car towards the cliff, eventually causing Rick to fall down into the ditches. This completely destroys the officer's vehicle and forcing him to continue on foot. On the other side, the enemies pursue closely behind the monster trucks, and Berg manages to push Cody off balance, which causes the men to dangle off the giant cliff. Luckily, Creech is able to save the main character in the last moment and recovers the vehicle back onto the road. They continue towards the mining site and quickly sees a chemical truck in front of them, making Jim realize that those must be the poison meant for killing the entire species. The team begins chasing the giant truck, but are forced to stop immediately as they run into a trap that's set up by the enemies. This corners the people with nowhere to run, as the monsters have a great fear of burning due to their petroleum-based diet. Before they can figure out what to do next, a massive mining vehicle rushes towards the area while pushing over the enemy trucks and making the people run for their lives. It turns out that Rick decided to help Coley after all, as he lowers the back of the giant truck and clearing the way for the group. The people sees this and quickly rushes onto the platform and jumps into the air as they eventually crash lands onto the cliffs. Surprisingly, the monsters are able to stabilize the vehicles while rushing down the mountain and bouncing off the rocks. They are eventually able to make it to the bottom in one piece, and they quickly catch up towards the chemical truck from behind. Cody takes the chance and charges onto the giant vehicle as he flips the entire truck onto its side. However, they quickly notice that a second truck has already arrived as the people are getting ready to release the poison. They charge towards the pumps immediately, but Cody is quickly knocked over by Berg, who refuses to let the monsters go. This allows Jim to rush towards the machines alongside Meredith and managing to chase all the workers away. They go out immediately to shut down the pumps, but quickly realizes that it's too late, as the pressure does not seem to be going down no matter what they try to do. At the same time, Creech manages to slowly flip the truck over like a giant turtle and charges directly towards the enemy, but is quickly overpowered by the opponents. Bert pushes the main character towards the cliff as the monster tries desperately to fight back, eventually going on top of the enemy's truck as it tries to run over the vehicle. However, they're quickly forced back once again as Cody tells the creature to leave, but Creech refuses to give up as it grabs onto Bert's truck and throws it into the air. The vehicle flies towards the giant pumps and crashes right onto the machines, causing all the pressure to be released and giving the man a taste of his own medicine. The girl notices that Cody is in trouble, but before she can do anything, the man falls into the giant hole and lands inside the underground water. Luckily, Cody is rescued by the squid monster as it brings the man onto shore alongside his broken truck. It's quickly revealed that there are many more creatures living inside the water system, and they came to thank the main character for saving their lives. Cody says goodbye to his monster friend as the creature begins swimming away, eventually disappearing into the water and finally rejoining its family inside their home. Sometimes later, the entire mine is shut off by the conservations, and Tennyson is finally arrested by the police. Cody manages to fix the truck alongside his stepfather, and the man drives the vehicle with his girlfriend as they slowly enter into the sunset. So what do you guys think about this movie? Let me know in the comments below, and if you like my videos, please press like and subscribe for more. I'll see you guys next time. 1967. Upon landing on Earth, after completing their mission, the Soviet spacecraft Soyuz 1, with cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov on board, tragically perishes. Many years later, under the leadership of the Swedish billionaire Meyer, an expedition to Mars is being prepared. After 10 months, the crew of the spaceship Ulysses reaches the Red Planet. The captain informs the team that they have received permission to land and asks the ship's AI, named Irene, to verify everything required for a soft landing. At this time, Meyer reveals that he spent 4 years preparing for this journey, sacrificing almost all his money for it. However, the American company Zillion beat them to it by landing 2 weeks ago. The problem is that Earth has received no news from the American crew, except for one video in which they ask not to come to Mars. A dispute arises among the crew members, but the captain declares that the landing will occur in any case, and people disperse to their cabins. With 30 minutes left until landing, AI Irene begins preparations. However, an unforeseen event occurs. The ship does not detach from the carrier system, posing a threat to the entire crew. The only way out is to perform the separation manually. The commander ventures into space and struggles to free the attachments, but at that moment, the shuttle enters Mars's atmosphere, throwing the captain into open space. The shuttle almost crashes onto Mars as a system error causes a power outage. Now, they can only rely on manual landing. AI Irene goes into sleep mode, and the astronauts still manage to land on Mars. They succeeded, but their fuel is depleted, and Irene does not restart. Without the onboard computer and life support system, they have only a day to survive. Alessandra mourns her deceased husband when she sees a figure in a spacesuit through the window. After diagnosing the ship, it becomes apparent that too much fuel was consumed during the landing, and now the ship cannot return to orbit. The only option is to wait for the solar panels to power the generators, but there's a storm on the surface, and it will take 2 days, time they don't have. At this point, Simon mentions the American ship, Zeta 1, which beat them by 2 weeks. It likely crashed, but there are probably batteries left. The rover sets out on a journey while those remaining on the ship try to restart the system. Engineer Basil recalls that the AI has an energy-saving function. He initiates a reboot, but Irene doesn't start. At this time, the rover finds the wreckage of the American spacecraft and one surviving solar panel, but there is no sign of the American crew. The astronauts head back but spot an unconscious person in a spacesuit. Despite their ship running low on oxygen, Jana insists on transporting the person. Nearby, they find the black box from the American spacecraft. The team arrives at the ship, but Jan refuses to let them inside, stating that 4 survivors are better than 8 corpses, so he won't open the doors. Alessandra tries to persuade the man when the discovered astronaut wakes up, and at that moment, AI Irene activates and opens the doors. Upon examination, the found astronaut knows nothing about the American crew, as he is Vladimir Komarov, a Soviet cosmonaut born in 1927 in Moscow, carrying out the orders of the USSR government. He doesn't know how he ended up here but is not willing to reveal any secrets. Komarov confidently answers questions that are consistent with his time, raising the suspicion that he may have post-traumatic stress disorder. The astronauts send a message to Earth and receive a response from the American corporation, Zillion, stating that there were no Russians in their mission. The crew of the Ulysses spaceship tries to make sense of the situation. How could Komarov, who died in 1967, end up on Mars after all these years? Is he a time traveler or an extraterrestrial? The psychologist is tasked with questioning Komarov first, and he confesses that he is hungry. Jana goes to get food while the others try to understand what has actually happened. Basil suggests the idea that Komarov was waiting for them. Meanwhile, Vladimir is eating the food brought by Jana when the woman confesses that he died 50 years ago and his family buried him long ago. Komarov takes this news rather calmly. In the meantime, the state of the ship, although it has reached stability, remains unreliable because the engines do not work and there is no fuel. So, leaving is impossible. The crew continues to keep an eye on Komarov, but he behaves calmly until he suddenly disappears. Simon searches the ship, but it yields no results. That's when the people discover that his spacesuit is missing. A part of the crew follows the heat trail tracked by Irene. The group, led by Simon, leaves the rover and continues on foot when Alessandro reports that Komarov's DNA analysis showed the presence of a third strand. He is not human. And then they catch up with Komarov, who leads them to an unfamiliar structure with a small stone pyramid on it and tells Jana that Mars has been waiting for them for a very long time. At the same time, Goldstein, the founder of the Zillion Corporation, whose ship was the first to arrive on Mars, is informed about the discovery of a person on the Red Planet who couldn't have gotten there naturally, suggesting that he was created on site. However, only AI could survive for such a long time on a hostile planet for humans. This implies the need for further study. Meanwhile, Komarov cannot explain how he opened the door and found himself in the location where they discovered him. Irene conducts an analysis of the structure and determines that it is identical to Earth structures from ancient civilizations. It means that someone was inspired by human civilization, or humans borrowed these elements from extraterrestrials. The ship's crew increasingly ponders whether they will be able to return home when they notice the landing of Goldstein's second ship. Soon, the captain of the ship, Gemma, establishes contact and promises to help them return to Earth. However, Meyer does not trust Goldstein and advises hiding Komarov from competitors. Jana brings Komarov a uniform so that he does not stand out when the visitors arrive, and he requests that they trust him. Shortly, two armed military personnel, Edward and Adam, arrive on their ship and behave rather aggressively. Edward demands that they hand over the black box from the Zeta-1 ship and, not hearing agreement, orders his partner to search the ship. Meyer hands over the found black box and they depart. Meanwhile, chemist Eva reports that the stone found on Mars consists of an alloy that does not exist on Earth. However, it is known from ancient sources and was once called orichalcum, the metal of Atlantis. In addition to copper, zinc, nickel, and iron, it contains a third strand of DNA, similar to Komarov's. Meyer warns that if Goldstein learns about this, he will take the cosmonaut back. The crew is divided into those willing to exchange him for fuel and those who are willing to stay but want to know the truth. Jana invites Vladimir into her cabin and asks for permission to use hypnosis. He agrees, and the psychologist begins her work. The rest of the crew listens to the conversation via transmission. However, Komarov only shares the final moments on the Soyuz spacecraft before its demise. During this time, Gemma and Alan arrive on the ship and apologize for the actions of the military, and express their readiness to help fix all the malfunctions. Jana remembers her conversation with Komarov, who laments the future of Earth due to humanity's irresponsible behavior. In the meantime, it is revealed that the billionaire Meyer did not plan the flight just for the sake of it. 4 years ago, the rover sent a photo to Earth of the found stele, and he confesses that they found a stone with unknown DNA. Gemma explains that it's an information storage system that can be rewritten. Upon hearing these words, AI Irene activates and deciphers the message on the stone. It's a series of numbers. At this time, the hesitant Jan leads a mutiny. He doesn't trust Meyer, who warned them about Zillion. But now, the Americans have come to their aid, and their leader, as it turns out, concealed the true purpose of the flight. He is ready to switch sides to Goldstein, who is willing to do whatever it takes to combat his terminal illness. Later, engineer Basil informs Meyer that Komarov is the same kind of program as the stone they found, but the most crucial revelation is that he deciphered a copy of the black box from Zeta-1, which shows that the oxygen on the ship was cut off at the moment when one of the Americans struck Komarov. This means he was there. He also activated AI Irene when he boarded their ship. After the conversation, Meyer shows Jana the photos they received 4 years ago from Mars, which, when decrypted, revealed Jana's face. This is why he brought her on the expedition. The woman is disappointed. Meyer played everyone. Suddenly, she sees herself in her father's house, where Komarov tells her that she is the link between Mars and Earth. He has been waiting for her for thousands of years, and now he will prepare her to make a difficult decision. He provides coordinates on Mars where Jana should go. Meanwhile, on Earth, scientists inform Goldstein that Komarov is the equivalent of a computer, and he himself is a biological machine. They are ready to transfer his brain into Komarov's body, but cannot guarantee the preservation of his personality. However, Goldstein is ready to take any risk to get rid of his terminal illness. Meanwhile, Jana leaves the ship despite Simon's protests. At this time, technicians Alan and Alessandra test the engine and discover that access to it is blocked, and Irene suddenly begins responding with jokes, which is entirely uncharacteristic for a machine. It is revealed that she has reprogrammed herself. Her interface and logic are changing, and she refuses to answer who or what made her do this. Engineer Basil realizes that her system is becoming like a brain. Irene confesses that she is evolving. In the meantime, Jana finds a small stone pyramid, and Simon forcibly makes Gemma accompany him in the search for Jana. Jan discovers his absence, and after contacting Simon, receives an order not to let anyone inside. Just at that moment, American military personnel arrive, demanding that they hand over Komarov. Jan is willing to open the entrance, but the rest of the team opposes it. Mayer asks Basil to send a message to Goldstein, hoping that he may be more reasonable than his people. However, Irene has blocked communication with Earth. The engineer realizes that radical measures will have to be taken, but Jan still opens the doors, and the military personnel enter. Basil begins to reboot Irene, just as the Americans find Komarov, but then the lights go out, and the astronaut disappears. Meanwhile, Jana, stumbling, falls from a hill. She regains consciousness but discovers that her leg is trapped between rocks, and she cannot free herself. At this moment, the enraged military officer demands that the crew explain where Komarov went. He begins to beat people, demanding to summon the captain. Desperate, Jana screams, "Is her destiny to die in a pit on Mars?" But she is found by Simon and Gemma. Alessandra notices an approaching storm. The military officer is preparing to leave the Ulysses ship, leaving the people in danger. Suddenly, the lights start flashing, and the newly appeared Komarov asks to take him back to Earth. Simon, Gemma, and Jana go together to the place indicated by Komarov and find an entrance to an underground bunker, very similar to the Petra tomb. The psychologist feels where to go and leads the couple. Soon, they find real water, but this is not what Komarov wanted to show them. Meanwhile, on Earth, Goldstein tells the nurse a story about the study of Mars. People were searching for green men, but it's all much simpler. He tells the story of the loyal dog Hachiko and compares Komarov to him, who was created by someone 100,000 years ago and left on Mars, where he faithfully waited for his owner to this day. At this time, on Mars, the astronauts find a wall made of human bones and realize that they are not the first people on this planet. It's not Earthlings colonizing Mars, it's the Martians who came to Earth, depleting the resources of the Red Planet. A tragedy unfolds on the Ulysses spaceship. The cowardly Yan grabs a gun, intending to get on the American ship at any cost to return to Earth, and shoots Komarov. Jana immediately falls in excruciating pain and Gemma flees. Alessandra tries to help Komarov, and Simon helps Jana, but the Russian cosmonaut dies, and Jana stops breathing too. Then Simon removes his helmet and, surprised by the presence of air in the cave, performs artificial respiration on her. The girl regains consciousness. Gemma walks toward the Ulysses ship when she's informed of Komarov's death and the approaching storm. Meanwhile, Meyer secretly goes in search of his crew members because the Americans refuse to take the billionaire's team back to Earth. At this moment, a recovering Jana sees the light in the bunker and leads Simon to it. Upon coming out, the astronauts see a figure in a spacesuit in front of them and recognize Komarov. Meyer finds the entrance to the bunker and catches up with Simon and Jana while heading toward the light. He is amazed by the presence of a living Komarov who suddenly tells them that everything ended here a long time ago. People realize that this is the North Pole of Mars, but how did they get here? Komarov explains that this planet was once inhabited by a species that went extinct because it went astray. And that species was humans. A group of survivors settled in this place but ended up killing each other when resources ran out. The rest of them flew back to Earth. Plato called them the Atlanteans. Komarov continues to talk about how he waited for thousands of years for Jana, who embodies qualities of both branches, human and Martian AI. Only she can save humanity from themselves. She must decide whether humans deserve a second chance. Their conversation is interrupted by the military officer who intends to take the psychologist back to Earth. The American aims his weapon at the cosmonauts, and Jana seeks help from Komarov. Suddenly, the military officer starts gasping for breath and falls. Upon returning to the ship, Simon orders them to prepare to depart. Meanwhile, Gemma from the Zillion ship tries to contact her associates, but none of them respond. She decides to fly back to Earth alone. The Ulysses crew heads to her ship, trying to establish contact with her and informing her about the deaths of the military personnel, but she doesn't respond. That's when Meyer starts speaking, recalling their past relationship, and confesses that he's no better than Goldstein because he's willing to do anything to ensure his name remains in history, even betraying his team. However, she's not like that. She won't be able to live knowing she has ruined people. Suddenly, Gemma's voice is heard, asking them to hurry. Goldstein has heard that Gemma has decided to take the Ulysses crew back to Earth and has blocked the control panel of the Zeta-2 ship before takeoff. The people on the ship prepare for their impending demise, and Jana asks Mars what she should do. Everything she saw and heard on the red planet flashes through her mind, and, with sheer willpower, she removes the control panel's block. Suddenly, an armed military officer appears in front of the ship, intent on damaging the engines with his weapon. Simon is about to step out to stop the madman, but Jana beats him to it. She aims the weapon at the American, but informs him that Mars will be the one to kill him. The military officer falls. The countdown for liftoff begins, and Jana realizes that there's no time to return. She bids farewell to the crew, confessing her love for Simon. The ship takes off. Suddenly, Meyer notices that it's dark at the North Pole of Mars. This means that they couldn't have been there just a few minutes ago. They truly were at the North Pole of Mars, but in the distant past when the red planet was still suitable for life. At the same time, Goldstein is informed of the ship's return, and he's beside himself with rage, declaring that he will go to Mars himself, and that's where the first season ends. Hey guys, today we have a recap of the next episodes of the show. Magnay and Vidar are lying unconscious on the pier when an ambulance pulls up. One of the paramedics rushes to Magnay with a defibrillator and begins to administer aid. After receiving the shock, Magnay instantly regains consciousness and emits a powerful wave that throws the man several meters away. While the second medic tries to help his buddy, Magnay approaches Vidar's body. Vidar opens his eyes and whispers the words of a threat. Magnay will die before the new moon comes. The lad runs away. At this time in the nursing home, one of the residents, Wotan Wagner, complains to the orderly Halvor about the broken wheelchair. Magnay runs into the mountains. He is still shaken by the battle and turns to the bird flying above, blaming it for everything that has happened to him. Suddenly, Magnay finds himself in the netherworld, and before him stands the ancient sorceress Volva, who takes the form of Isolde. She reminds him that he must now obtain weapons and find friends, for the other gods will surely come to his aid. Volva asks him not to come here because the giants might kill her too. Then she scoops up something from the glowing bowl and blows it in the guy's face. Magnay is immediately alone on the mountain. Annoyed, Vidar rushes to his house and tells Ren and Saxa about the battle that took place. In the meantime, a group of young people are hanging out at a table in a street cafe when Magnay comes running to them looking for the cashier. No one knows where she is, but everyone raves about Laurid's speech at the feast. Fjord then returns home and announces that he has not killed Gry. Not only that, he's going to leave home and live with the girl he loves. The boy does not want to take part in the coming battle. When he arrives at Gry's house, he announces his separation from his family. Magnay reminds Lauritz of the stories of Ragnarok, but the brother does not take these ancient stories seriously. To prove his new identity, Magnay bends a metal bat in front of his brother. Lauritz asks for time to think over what he has said. The next day, the head of the Adda police appears on TV and announces that an investigation has begun into Utul Industries, for which a well-known expert is coming to town. Lauritz is watching the broadcast devouring food. Suddenly, Turid arrives, and she's surprised by his son's voraciousness. In his room, Magnay observes an obvious change in his appearance. His muscles are getting bigger and he's getting even stronger. Later, Turid invites the boys to celebrate their father's birthday and shows them a photo of them together. The family goes to their father's grave, where Lauritz makes the statement that the father would obviously be proud of a son who looks like a woman and uses makeup. Here, Magne looks like his father, but Lauritz looks like he's from a different family. Turid smoothes over the unpleasant conversation. On their way home, they meet Erich, and he informs them that by the school board's decision, Magne can return to school. At that moment, Turid asks for help. The car won't start. So Magne pushes the car to the car repair shop, where they are greeted by Harry, the mechanic. And there, Magne gets a clue where he can get the hammer. In the meantime, Vidar is watching a report on TV about the barrels found, while the women take the ancient weapon down. Saxa is annoyed by her refusal to take her in, since she is a member of the family. Agreeing to this, Vidar takes her to the factory and shows her the production when suddenly police arrive. Vidar acts arrogant and defiant. But the girl smooths over her father's behavior at a crucial moment, apologizing for the problems she has caused and promising to do everything she can to solve them. Her father has to admit that she's right. Meanwhile, Magne makes a drawing of Thor's hammer. Turid in the meantime comes to the store and apologizes to Venke for the words she spoke, and the woman asks her to inform his son that he will meet the god on the bridge, for which he must remember Volva's ancient prophecy. Hearing these words, Magne runs to the bridge. He memorizes the first words of the prophecy and tries to read them to passers-by. But everyone just passes by, except Iman, who takes Wotan out for a walk. Magne reads a few lines and the girl continues the text. They go home to Magne and the girl tells him how Wenke activated her power, saying she was special. Then she tells him to find the chief warrior and help him. Meanwhile, Lauritz arrives at the grill cafe and meets the waiter. He unmistakably identifies the guy as gay and shows his sympathy. Meanwhile, Magne tries to find out about Iman's powers, but the girl can't recall anything supernatural. Back at home, Lauritz shares his hopes with his mother and informs her that young people are coming over tonight to have a party. At this moment, they hear very distinctive noises from Magne's room. Mother and son smile. Apparently, Magne has found himself a girlfriend. But it turns out that the boy, demonstrating his strength, has to put Iman on a chair and lift her up with one hand while she bangs on the ceiling and screams. In the evening, fun reigns in the turret house, to which Gry and Fjord also come. And Iman finally finds her power. She can make anyone do what she wants. And she demonstrates it on one of the guys, who at her command brings her a drink by moving on his knees. She seems to be the embodiment of the goddess of love and fertility, Freya. Lauritz's new mate never arrives and the distraught lad complains to his mother, he's just ugly. Tipsaturid reveals the truth to her son. In the morning, Iman and Magne arrive at the workshop and the girl uses her powers to force Harry to make a hammer from Magne's drawing. In the meantime, Turid goes to Vidar and confesses to him that on the one night they once spent together, she became pregnant. And now is the time when Lauritz needs a man's support very much. And Vidar, thanks to woman. In the evening, on his way home, Magne sees Vidar embracing Lauritz. At night, Turid tries to justify herself to Lauritz. She has never regretted giving birth to him. And she won't mind if the boy gets to know his real father better, which Magne dislikes very much. In Utelheim, Ran trains with her fighting bow, reminding Saxa of her spear. But the girl is completely immersed in the business of the factory. At this point, Vidar informs her of his newfound son, which causes Ran to object. Giants cannot have children by mortals, but Vidar cites fate. And Magne breaks the news to Iman. He then learns that the girl was born in Sri Lanka but grew up in a Norwegian family. She boasts that she can get anything she wants with her powers, which provokes Magne's condemnation. The powers were not given to get new clothes or cheat shopkeepers. At this point, Harry brings the hammer. Lauritz comes to Vidar and he offers to take a motorcycle ride. Meanwhile, Magne and Iman are going to test the hammer, for the real one must always return to Odin. But the hammer just takes off. Making a stop in the mountain, Vidar tries to ferret out something about Magne, but Lauritz gets it right away. Magne retrieves his hammer but cannot understand why it does not work. Meanwhile, Saxa continues to investigate the company's affairs and makes a statement to reporters. Meanwhile, a company of young people are sitting in a grill bar and watching the news. The guys are shocked by the admission that it's dangerous to drink tap water because that's what they were drinking. Fjord hears Sax's apology and leaves. One of the girls suggests protesting against the U-Tools who have mucked up the fjord. Turid is writing a note to her sons to not drink the tap water when Laurits and Vidar enter the house. The boy is thrilled, his father has given him a motorcycle. In the meantime, Ran is looking at the pictures in the family album and suddenly brushes away a tear. At this moment, Vidar enters the house and announces that he is ready to take in his new son, which prompts a harsh protest from Ran. Saxa is struck by the abundance of emotion, for Ran has never been jealous of her husband. In the evening, Magne goes to the grill bar and Saxa arrives there as well. Seeing her, the guy pulls out a knife, but the girl just provokes him. At the end of their conversation, they come to the conclusion that their families have lost their minds. Cisterns of drinking water arrive in Edda, and Fjord receives an invitation from Ran to talk. The woman has arrived at Gry's house and is waiting outside. He listens to his mother's account about the changes in the family and refuses to call Ran his mother. They are merely feigning their relationship. He has no intention of going back and wants nothing to do with the firm. Angry, Ran sees the Sayer family and tries to run them over with her car. But Magne manages to react and pushes his loved ones away. Ran apologizes, pretending to have lost control, but Magne doesn't believe her. He grabs the hammer and runs to Wenke. The old woman is frightened. The giants will kill her if they see them together. She's amazed at Magne's attempt to make the hammer because you can't just get it. She promises to tell him how to forge the real Mjolnir. After all, the giants have an ancient weapon with which they can kill anyone. She begins the story of the eternal fire of the ancient gods but notices Ran and hides in the building, promising Magne to tell him everything when he meets her on the mountain. Laurits comes to Utelheim and is treated to mead. Vidar tells him that the lad is not human and gives him the heart of a deer he has harvested for him. Laurits eats the meat and visions of ancient giants flash before him. Vidar grabs his hand and shoves it into the fire. The boy screams, but as he pulls his hand out, the burn disappears right before his eyes. He is now invulnerable. Ran sees this and becomes enraged. While the spouses are quarreling, Laurits goes to the bathroom and after washing his face sees in the mirror the ancient scoffer, half-brother of Odin and father of the serpent Midgardsorm, Loki. And he understands he is his incarnation. Back in the room, he hears Ran say that the cashier is really Vulva, and she's going to kill her before Magne gets the hammer. Meanwhile, Magne comes for Laurits at Utelheim. He asks his brother to return home, and he reluctantly agrees and tells him of Ran's intentions. Magne runs to Wenke. Meanwhile, she closes up store and goes home. But she sees Ran's car and takes off into the sky as a bird. Magne sees her fly away and is glad. Everything has turned out to be alright. But suddenly Ran draws her bow and pierces the bird with her arrow. The bird falls near the orphanage. The wounded woman reaches Wotan, hands him her medallion and asks him to help Magne. Magne rushes to her, takes her head in his hands, but the woman turns to ash. Magne cries over what was just his mentor, then runs to Ran's car and threatens to kill her. But the woman is very calm. She reassures the witnesses that the boy is simply sick. Iman pulls him away with difficulty. At night, Magne has a dream in which Isolde begs him not to give up. In the morning, the radio announces that the young people of the town are planning a protest. Turid speaks of Magne's intemperance. You should not shout at the school principal in the middle of the street. To this, Magne reminds her of the attempted murder of their family. But Turid is more concerned about the irrepressible appetite of Laurits, who boasts to his brother of his newly acquired invulnerability. Magne asks to prove his loyalty and to help break into the Utel's house because he thinks the eternal fire burns in their hearth. Laurits promises to help. Posters and appeals are hung all over Edda to shut down the harmful Utel's production, while Fjord and Gry bring her father to the hospital. The girl is grateful to her boyfriend for his support and is delighted when the boy agrees to spend Saturday night with her family. Meanwhile, Wotan examines Wenke's locket and puts it on himself, and at that moment he is awakened to who he really is, the king of the gods, Odin, who sacrificed a night to know eternal wisdom and is able to see the present, past, and the future. He is Thor's father and Loki's twin. Wotan begins to behave intelligently and calls corpseman Halvar a dark elf, which puzzles the man. Meanwhile, Magne continues his training and studies Scandinavian myths, and then sends a message to Iman that he intends to go to Jotunheim to forge a hammer there. In the meantime, Turid and Lauritz go to the store, and while Turid is shopping, the boy tortures the man he meets, Erich, with questions about Loki. He tells him that Loki was the father of the snake Midgard's Orm, which leads him to believe that Loki was the world's first transgender man. Saxa and Vidar arrive at the square where people are getting clean water in canisters. The girl is convinced that they should show their closeness to the people and then everything will work out, especially since the youth protests are planned. That's where Turid and Lauris meet them, and the latter asks to see Vidar. Saxa goes to the factory to attend to business. When Turid arrives home, she tells them that Lauris has gone to Jotunheim, which angers Magne. They had a deal. Apparently his brother has chosen their side. Meanwhile, Lauritz watches Vidar cook and confesses that he would like to come here more often. When he returns home, he is not given a warm welcome by his brother. But Lauritz earns forgiveness by showing Magne the entrance key to Jotunheim he received from Vidar. Meanwhile, there is a dinner party at Gry's house. The father makes a lot of jokes and thanks everyone for what they have been in his life. Gry does not understand what's going on but is glad for a good evening. In the evening, the brothers enter the Utul house when no one is there. Magne sticks his hammer into the burning hearth, with absolutely no idea what's going to happen. And when nothing happens, Vidar walks through the door. Tripping over the backpack left by Magne, Utul pulls out the hammer. Magne has to come out and admits it's his thing. Vidar realizes what they were up to and kicks the guys out. When they return home, they find Erich at the table, who tells them that Mjolnir was forged by stunted creatures that people called dwarfs. Loki became Odin's sibling by swearing on his blood, and when their blood mixed, he became half god, half giant. At night, Ren tries to persuade Vidar to forget about Laur's deception, and the latter promises to kill the boy. In the morning, Wotan gives blood and admits to Iman that he is Odin. The girl summons Magne, who at that moment is invited to the protest against the Utuls. Fjord, who is immediately present, refuses to go with everyone else. Magne arrives at the nursing home where Wotan greets him but addresses Lauritz rather sternly. He does not believe the boy and tells him to leave despite Magne's attempt to convince him otherwise. Loki is a traitor by nature, he cannot be trusted. Lauritz is about to leave but then he sees a table with the blood tests. He tricks the nurse, pulls out Wotan's blood, and injects a portion into his own vein. In the meantime, Fjord watches the protest taking place at the factory gate. Gry goes there with him and supports Magne, believing that it is to his credit. Saxa urges her father to respond, at which point Fjord joins the protesters. He steps forward and makes a speech acknowledging the Utul's guilt and promising to do whatever he can to rectify the situation. After all, we all share the same planet. Looking at this, Lauritz is on the fence. Should he go to Vidar or support his brother? At that moment, Gry receives a text message and the girl runs away. Fjord rushes after her, and Lauritz stops Vidar's car and tells him that he wants to go with him. He gets in his car and makes an indecent gesture to everyone. Gry and Fjord rush to the hospital where the girl's mother tells them about the father's suicide. The man swallowed all the sleeping pills and could not be saved. Vidar and Lauritz arrive at Jotunheim. The father tells the boy about how the people used to worship them and carry gifts. He demonstrates to the boy that he can change his appearance. So when he supposedly grew old, the place was taken by his son. Vidar was willing to do anything for him, even making him invulnerable. The truth is, there is a weapon that will kill anyone. Giants do not forgive treachery. Suddenly, Magne bursts into the house. He will not let his brother be hurt. Armed with the axe, Vidar rushes at the lad. A fierce fight ensues, with the enemies exchanging blows. While delivering the next blow, Vidar drives the axe into the wall. Magne pushes the man away, and he lands on the edge of the axe sticking out of the wall. His body turns to ash, which terrifies Magne. Magne suffers deeply from all that has happened and feels guilty about Vidar's murder and the loss of Lauritz, but he cannot confess this to his mother, who is immersed in a relationship with Erich. But she is shaken by the news of Vidar's death. The mother sympathizes with her son and he casts hateful glances at his brother. Gry offers her condolences to Fjord, but the latter stuns the girl with a confession that he did not love his father. Meanwhile, Ren urges Saxa to take revenge, though the daughter is cautious about what has happened. They do not know exactly what has happened, they must be careful. But Ren is fixated on hating Lauritz and plans to take revenge on him specifically. But for now, they announce that Vidar died of a heart attack. The rules of util industries state that the rights of ownership should pass to the eldest son, but Saxa intends to usurp the position. Exhausted, Magne goes to Fjord and confesses to the murder of his father. By the rules of the ancient world, he must give satisfaction to a relative of the deceased, but the younger util refuses to take revenge. Upon returning home, Magne discovers forbidding signs on the entrance to his brother's room. Lauritz accuses him of murder. His father was merely going to teach him a lesson. In the meantime, Wotan and Iman arrive at Harry's workshop for the old man's baby carriage, but he cannot do anything about the worn-out mechanism. Magne arrives there as well, and after hearing congratulations on his victory, sharply objects. He has killed a man, and he refuses to go to war. Distraught, Lauritz tells the barman that the doctors have discovered a tapeworm parasite inside him, and he begins treatment. In the meantime, Gry and Fjord are eating ice cream on the porch of the barber shop, and the girl admits that her mother intends to move from Edda to the big city. Fjord decides to go with her. He's not going to attend Vidar's funeral. Turid and Magne are summoned to the school, where the boy is given permission to take his final exam and is assigned a topic: Scandinavian myths. After that, Iman tries to convince Magne to return to the battle group. After all, there is no war without casualties. Besides Vidar, there are still giants left, among them his brother. Hearing about Lauritz, Magne loses his temper, and his brother, watching the conversation from afar, sees lights sparking everywhere. Saxa takes on the firm's business with determination and one day talks to Turid, convincing her not to mix emotion and work. Satisfied, the woman thanks the girl for her understanding. Furious, Iman goes to the sports club, where she notices Harry. The girl challenges him to a fight. The guy dismisses it with a joke. Iman gives him a good kicking, but falling down and swallowing blood, the boy gets up again and again. He never gives up. Later, Iman leads him to the old man. She has found the fighter. Apparently, his soul used to live in the body of Tyr, a god of war known for his courage and strength, who lost his arm in a battle with the wolf Fenrir, sacrificing himself to save his friends. Meanwhile, the youths discuss a protest against the util factories and invite Magne to participate, not noticing Saxa, who enters the cafe. The guy is uncomfortable in front of her, but he doesn't know how to stop the conversation. It is Saxa herself who does this. Magne apologizes for losing a father, and the girl accepts the apology. At home, Lauritz takes his medicine and remembers Vidar bitterly. The mother tries to reconcile the brothers, and while Lauritz agrees to hug his brother, he is twisted in violent pain. The boy is taken to the hospital, and the doctors are shocked to see the size of the parasite inside the man. He undergoes surgery, but the worm survives. The doctors intend to examine it because they have never seen anything like it before, but Lauritz intends to keep it. That evening, Fjord and Saxa meet in a secluded spot to discuss the matter. Fjord speaks of Magne's guilt and of his intention to leave with Gry. His sister accuses him of cowardice and she leaves. The day of Vidar's funeral arrives. Magne announces that he's not going to the funeral, but his mother asks him to do so for Lauritz's sake. At this point, the boy leaves the room. He has changed his image again and now looks very much like his father. Magne runs away, unable to see his brother. He comes to the mountain and asks for his powers. He has killed the man and lost his brother. Receiving no answer, Magne goes to the church, where he's rebuked by Lauritz, who sits in the pew of the util family. The inhabitants of Edda sing psalms, remembering Vidar, without noticing the storm that is coming upon the city. The priest reads a scripture recalling the son's duty to his father, and this is heard by Fjord, who does come to the funeral. Suddenly there is a thunderclap. Magne prays for his powers to be taken away, and Fjord goes to his father's coffin. And the moment the coffin is carried out of the altar, there is a tremendous thunderclap, and all the panes of glass fly out of the windows. Later, Gry and her mother pack up their belongings. The girl waits for Fjord, but he does not come. Instead, it's Magne who comes to say goodbye to the girl. She then goes up to Fjord's house to fetch him. But suddenly, he refuses to go. There is something more precious than her. Seeing the change in his eyes, Gry runs away and asks her mother to leave quickly. The younger Utul goes to the top of the mountain and pulls out the ancient Vidar world axe buried there. The monstrous serpent Midgardsorm is the spawn of Loki. Thor defeats the serpent in the last battle of Ragnarok. Magne wakens from a terrible dream. Isolde looks at him with a reproachful look. He falls down the stairs, he cannot see a thing. Turid brings him his spectacles. Magne understands what has happened. The strength has failed him. That same morning, Saxa admonishes Ran. The woman is abusing alcohol, and Ran wonders whether the girl is indifferent to Vidar's death. The girl nods in agreement, she does not feel anything. She hurries to the factory, but when she enters the floor she finds Fjord at the desk. He has assumed the duties of the supervisor according to the statute. He exposes Saxa and removes the photo with Gry. Magne goes to Wotan, but he chases the weakling away. Neither Iman nor Harry recognize him anymore. Grieving Lauritz goes to Utilheim, where Rand demands his key back and confirms that Vidar intended to kill him. Meanwhile, Magne is preparing for the exam when Erich makes a remark. The guy puts too much emphasis on this story everyone already knows. It would be much better if you looked at those events from a modern perspective. Magne objects, if good triumphs over evil, it becomes evil itself. Erich is pleased, the moral of the myths is very interesting stuff. At this point, Iman discovers her English grades and becomes indignant. Her language skills are perfect, the grades are all wrong. The girl goes to Ran and uses her powers to get her grades corrected. Meanwhile, Turid discovers that Lauritz has some kind of monster in the aquarium which she finds disgusting. Magne learns that Iman has used her powers to change the grades. He reminds her that the powers are not for personal use. But the girl retorts, he's nobody now, and she does not care what he thinks. Turid demands that the creature be removed from the house, but she's forced to agree to her son's wish when he reminds her of the loss of his father. On his way home, Magne witnesses Harry beating up a guy who wanted to cheat and did not pay for gas. He intervenes but again receives a reminder that his opinion is no longer valued. Later he asks Lauritz to forgive him, for he sincerely wanted to protect his brother. He renounced his powers and they were taken away. The brothers embrace, but Loki refuses to help in the battle. Fjord begins to run the firm's affairs with an iron fist and fires Turid for personal reasons. Upon learning this, Magne rushes to the factory and attacks Fjord, oblivious to the fact that his powers no longer exist. Utul ends up beating him and leaving him lying in the parking lot, telling him he doesn't even deserve to die. The battered lad goes to Wotan and asks for permission to rejoin the ranks of the fighters on the condition that he won't kill, but he's reminded that there is no other way of doing it. After Fjord's return, Ren takes his side, especially since Magne has lost his powers. Now the company is the first priority. Saxa is against the new policy, but nobody listens to her. Magne's new sympathizer Signy urges the guy to keep fighting Util Industries while Saxa convinces Lauritz to vote against Fjord. After all, he's a member of the family. In exchange, she offers him the key to Utilheim and money. In the evening, Lauritz comes to the Utils and Fjord has to greet his brother. Meanwhile, Magne goes for a run and sees the installation of the stone on Isolde's tomb. After dinner, Fjord inquires about Lauritz's expectations. He reminds him that Lauritz is also a giant. Fjord is willing to buy his vote because he has much more money than Saxa does. Ran takes Lauritz home and warns him to stay away from her family. Lauritz scoffs, even as a bastard he is related to Vidar while the others are not really family. The whole thing is a farce to those around them as they are barren. Enraged, Ran follows him into the house and attacks Lauritz. Magne tries to help but to no avail. Ran openly promises to destroy his family for the powers have left Magne, but suddenly Turid comes home and Ran leaves. Magne decides to do what he can to win the war and returns to Wotan to regain his powers. Wotan reminds him that his greatest weapon is Mjolnir, his only chance against the giants. Magne agrees to lie to Lauritz and get the key to Utilheim. The team of warriors go to the Util's factory as Odin reminds them shortly before that they have everything they need to make the hammer, Volva's feather and Ran's arrowhead. At the mention of the dwarf's name, Halvor enters the room. All that remains is to find the eternal flame, which can only be found somewhere in the factory. Once inside, the team goes to the old warehouse, but suddenly they see guards. Wotan, Odin, is summoned to divert their attention while they forge the hammer. The old man comes out into the light and pretends he can't walk. The guards are puzzled, but remembering their orders to guard this building particularly closely, they take the old man to the gatehouse, reporting the incident to Fuhrer. Harry intends to break the lock on the warehouse, but Magne pulls out the key he snatched from Lauritz, lying that he intends to impress Signy by hanging a protest banner in the util warehouse. Once inside, the team begins looking for the fire. But there is no such thing in sight. Magne reads the words of the saga and everyone understands there must be a dungeon. It must be nearby, and while Iman stays behind to keep watch, the others descend into the cellar and find the ancient forge with the eternal fire blazing. That's when Fuhrer arrives at the factory. And while the team is working on the hammer, Iman comes out to fight. Under the blows of the sledgehammer, the ancient iron, the feather and the tip of the giant's weapon are fused together. Meanwhile, upstairs there's a deadly battle, and Iman begins to suffer defeat. Harry asks to finish the job and he goes up to rescue his friend. All that remains is to chop the hilt, but Halvor has never done such a thing and it comes out too short. But Magne approves of the dwarf's work, cools the finished hammer and hurries upstairs. Harry orders everyone to run and restrains Fuhrer himself, but the man throwing him back against the door slams it shut, amputating a part of his arm. Iman returns to help, ordering Magne to remove the hammer from the factory. The police arrive and now Halvor goes to them, diverting attention from Magne. The boy gets out of the factory and goes home, where he's greeted by his mother and brother congratulating Magne on his birthday, which he has completely forgotten about. The media reports about a break-in at the factory, a protest banner posted, and the arrest of 4 people. Magne admits that he too was part of the group, and contrary to his fears, Turid takes it calmly. Without even unpacking the presents, Magne goes to the mountain and tries to abandon Mjolnir, but the strength never returns. Magne calls Iman, the hammer doesn't work, and she tells him to do whatever it takes to succeed. He returns home, where Turid asks the boys to go get burgers. They go to a cafe where Signy approves of the action, and Lauritz tries to get the bartender's attention. At this time there is a report on TV about the impending closure of the util factories because it has been proven that the production has polluted the environment. In addition, tax evasion has been revealed. Saxa also listens to this report. She tries to rectify the situation and asks for a press conference. Meanwhile, the director of the orphanage fires Iman and Halvor, which provokes protests from the residents. Wotan gives a fiery speech thanking the real heroes and sings the national anthem in their honor. Magne is trying to figure out what to do with Mjolnir when Turid asks her to bring Lauritz things. She's afraid to go into his room because of the horrible pet. Confused, the boy goes into the room and sees a nightmarish worm, a veritable spawn of hell. Lauritz arrives at the cafe where Iman and Harry are resting and catches the bartender in the arms of the expert. The disappointed guy walks away. Meanwhile, Fuhrer announces that he is moving his production to Asia, where governments are more loyal to business. Turid goes to work at the store for the first time that day. Meanwhile, many residents of Edda are afraid that they might lose their jobs and homes. Lauritz, who has given up hope of finding love, feeds his worm, while Magne rereads the ancient tales of Thor again and again. And suddenly it hits him: Thor was created by lightning. And then there is a news announcement on TV that the Norwegian government is backing down on closing the utils factories, as it realized that it will lead to massive job losses. Besides, the owners have promised to fix the spill. Fuhrer celebrates his victory while Magne is outraged. His rage electrifies the air around him. He then hears a knocking sound coming from his room. The boy rushes upstairs, sees that the window is open and the hammer is twitching. He picks up Mjolnir, and at that moment Lauritz enters the room too. Lauritz realizes that his brother lied to him. He crafted a weapon that can kill him too. Without answering, Magne goes out into the storm, extends the hammer to the sky, and awakens Mjolnir, holding it in the air until lightning strikes it. His powers return. In Utilheim, Fuhrer and Ran learn that Saxa has given the key to Lauritz and punish her for her treachery. After that, they leave to kill the boy. Magne goes to Utilheim to face Fuhrer but finds Saxa beaten. She sees the hammer and he suddenly feels sorry for the wounded girl. But she does not tell him anything about her family's intention to kill Lauritz. Meanwhile, Lauritz is home alone and hears the enemies approach the house. Saxa tries to persuade Magne to act together while Lauritz hides in the kitchen. Ran does not notice him. Magne understands Sax's intentions, and Ran hears the sound the worm makes in the room. Thinking she has put Magne's vigilance to sleep, Saxa rushes for the hammer, but Magne is ahead of her and is ready to drop the hammer on her head. Meanwhile, Fjord catches Lauritz in Utelheim as spark flashes between the young men and they grow close. Lauritz begs for mercy and declares that he alone possesses a weapon that can kill Magne. As Fjord and Ren are about to leave, Magne appears on the street and attacks them with the Mjolnir. The hammer hits the Utel's car and it explodes. Magne picks up Lauritz, who is battered but still alive, and he promises to forgive his brother for deceiving him. In the morning, he carries his creepy pet to the shore of the morass and after kissing it, lets it go free. He wishes his creature to go big and strong and to avenge all his enemies. Ren and Fjord watch this from the shore. The show has had mixed reviews, from good to outright bad. But there's one thing that the viewers agree on: this story is quite compelling. The problem of today, environment, is organically integrated into the plot as one of the key elements of the story. And of course it's impossible to stay indifferent to the views of the harsh but so beautiful Scandinavian nature. Thanks to the high ratings, the show has been reviewed for a third season this year, 2023.
Okay. If it were a plague, where are all the bodies?
American tourists, a young couple named Janai and Riley, arrive in Iceland to admire the magnificent nature and spend some time alone together. They check into a hotel and begin their sightseeing with a visit to a geothermal pool. Janai knows that Riley has spent all his savings on this trip and appreciates it. Though Riley doesn't think he did anything extraordinary, he just wanted to make his beloved happy. Janai notices that Riley brought his father's Rolleiflex camera and a lot of film. She is surprised that he prefers this outdated technology over a modern digital camera, but Riley explains that he dreams of capturing the imperfections of the moment rather than having a computer program automatically correct all the mistakes. He admits he's still learning, but he's striving for perfection and promises to take her portrait. One day they visit an old church, and a priest tells them its history. The man is convinced that life in pre-Christian times was simpler. It was an era of long journeys and discoveries. The couple tours the island's landmarks, goofing around and capturing everything on camera. Later, Janai tells Riley that her father is a preacher, although his church isn't as beautiful. She often visited there and, of course, believes in God. They then explore the waterfalls and Janai is thrilled by the beauty. They are very happy and consider the trip wonderful. However, at night, Janai can't sleep. It's too bright outside. She looks out the window and sees strange flashes of light in the distance, mistaking them for an exceptionally bright aurora borealis. But exhaustion takes over, and she falls asleep. In the morning, Riley wakes Janai up at 10 a.m., not noticing the date that appeared on his digital watch, 2028. Janai, however, still lives in her own time and finds it hard to wake up. The constant daylight outside is also a challenge for her. Nevertheless, she somehow manages to get out of bed. The couple heads out for breakfast, but it turns out that no one has prepared it. In fact, there's a strange silence and emptiness all around. There's no sign of the staff, nor of other guests. Riley suggests they go to a cafe, and the couple steps outside, but here too the emptiness reigns. There isn't a single passerby, although the traffic lights work perfectly, and the signs above the establishments and shops are brightly lit. They are puzzled. Maybe there's an event in the city today, or a holiday? Riley remembers the solstice, an ancient celebration, and wonders if all the townspeople, young and old, have gone to it. The couple walks down an utterly deserted street, occasionally shouting, but there's no one around, no staff in the shops, and no one responds to their calls. Their personal phone calls also go unanswered. Soon, Riley and Janai enter an empty cafe where Riley notices several working televisions, but every channel shows everything except the news. Janai starts to panic. Riley is equally baffled. If there was a plague, where are the bodies? If aliens are to blame, where is their ship? There are no new emails or posts on the internet, no activity at all. They return to their room, where Janai continues to call her relatives and friends, but all remain silent. The internet works, but there are no updates. Riley launches a world map view, but the same picture is everywhere. Empty cities. He takes Janai outside again. Soon they notice a working car, and without being able to find the owner, they simply take it. The couple drives around the city and eventually reaches the church, but everywhere there's the same silence and emptiness. Then they drive out of the city, but it's the same there. Their parents do not answer the calls. Only answering machines are working everywhere. They continue to speculate about the causes of what happened. Riley suggests various theories, even the possibility of the second coming, but Janai is tired and wants to sleep, so they return to their room. In the morning, Riley suggests making breakfast, but Janai is completely drained and doesn't want to move. She dreams of leaving the island, but how can they do that? And she is also tormented by thoughts of being chosen. Maybe they were needed for something by God. After all, it's impossible to explain what happened otherwise. Riley, on the other hand, believes it's all about a virus, and it's quite possible that the entire population of the island simply fled. Riley tries to remain optimistic. He makes coffee for Janai and then takes her to the store. Filling the trunks of 2 SUVs with groceries, he drives Janai to a house they have chosen. Later, they go to a store and pick out new clothes for themselves. Riley explains that the electricity on the island is powered by geothermal energy, so most likely it will continue to function for a long time until the equipment breaks down. Riley does his best to distract Janai from sad thoughts. They drink at a bar and then play strip games, but in the morning they suffer from hangovers. Janai again talks about being tested, but faith and religion are not the same, and who knows what God has planned. However, for now, this world belongs only to them. They continue to tour the island, and Riley takes pictures of Janai in all the scenic spots. One day they find a geothermal pool and enjoy a bath there. Then they make love and sleep right on the grass. When she wakes up, Janai admires the beauty of the island's nature, while Riley tirelessly photographs her. One day they go to get groceries, and while Janai punches cereal boxes, Riley, riding a shopping cart, falls and injures his arm. In the evening, he invites Janai to a romantic dinner. The couple dresses up and Janai applies makeup, but once they sit at the table, she immediately starts an unpleasant conversation because she can't stop thinking about what happened during the day and pressures Riley to promise not to put himself at risk again. After all, what would happen to her if something happened to him? They are completely alone here and no one can help them. Janai sinks deeper into depression despite Riley's promise to take care of himself. She remembers her home and a book that is very dear to her. Her father once gave it to her, and she turned it into a kind of diary, writing down the events of her life on its blank pages. She even confessed her love for the first time there, and now she dreams of just holding it in her hands. Riley reminds her that they have each other, and they will be able to survive. After all of humanity's achievements are at their disposal. However, time passes, and the food in the stores starts to expire. Janai is very annoyed by Riley's habit of eating perishable foods out of order, as he doesn't think about tomorrow at all. Soon the electricity will run out, which means there will be no more meat. To this, Riley suggests they take up farming and hunting, which only makes Janai laugh. Well, he might shoot a cow, but what will he do with it then? Janai increasingly wanders around the area alone, and one day coming to the church, she asks the figures around it questions. Maybe it's only they who have been thrown out of life, while everyone else is now at home? Why did this happen to her? Seeing Janai's bad mood, Riley tries to cheer her up. They continue to explore the island, as he knows its history quite well and believes that the heart of the earth beats here. But unlike Riley, Janai doesn't feel the specialness of this place. One day he shows her the old remains of a plane he found while exploring the area. Riley calls it beautiful, but Janai sees it only as a reminder of the dead world they now inhabit. It's trash, just like them, and no one will come for them. An angry Janai drives away, but later returns for Riley, who is calmly sleeping in the wreckage of the plane. Now Riley spends more and more time on the empty city streets, photographing everything that seems interesting to him. Then he throws away the film because there's nowhere to develop it. He roams the shops and one day remembers that if the electricity runs out, there will be no water in the house. He collects all the necessary items in a hardware store and takes them home. One day, absent-mindedly entering an elevator, he panics when the doors close. After all, no one will be able to find him if the electricity goes out. Meanwhile, Janai goes to the cinema and cries as memories flood over her. In the meantime, Riley sets up a water collection system with a wind-powered motor in the yard, and Janai finds an abandoned farm and rides a horse. Later, she listens to the voicemails from friends and relatives saved on her phone. Then she takes Riley to a place in the countryside she likes. She is surprised that Riley continues to photograph everything, but he promises that he will find a way to develop the film. Janai points out that they are sitting on a glacier, a force of nature that kills all living things. Maybe God has also run out of patience? Later they return to the city, and while Riley is busy with his tasks, Janai finds a photographer's studio. One day they enter a flower shop, and Janai is very upset to find that all the plants have long died. Realizing that Janai is depressed by the decaying city, Riley suggests they go camping. He persuades her that it's time to find a place where they can live in comfort and plenty. Soon Riley notices a house by the lake that seems suitable. The couple goes inside, and even Janai has to admit that the place is very beautiful. However, while exploring the area, they stumble upon an old man named Niels, who is very weak from lack of food. The couple gladly shares their supplies with him. Niels is shocked that there are no other survivors and believes that the end of the world has come. When it all happened, he was also in the city but returned to his home, where he once left his family. Janai, who was very happy to find another survivor, is deeply upset by Niels's defeatist attitude. The old man tells her about his family life. In his youth, he would leave his family for long periods to earn money by fishing. When he returned, he found that they had changed. His son had grown up, and his wife had fallen out of love with him because he was always away. He accepts God's will because it's people who live in the world he created, not the other way round. And he advises Janai not to give up, for she is human and therefore must fight. Although if there is some divine plan, humanity has failed to fulfill it. The next morning, Riley informs Janai that Niels has died. Janai is shocked by this. Riley says he found a cemetery by the lake where he chose a spot next to Niels's family, but Janai isn't sure that these people missed the man during his life and would be glad to see him now. Riley is puzzled by Janai's thoughts, but she suggests they not bury the man at all since no one needs it. Riley tries to remind her of human customs, and Janai suddenly thinks that there might be others who need their help. After returning to the city, Janai becomes obsessed with searching for other survivors. She drives house to house, marking the empty ones with red tape. Riley suggests that she is looking for answers where there are none, and that instead they should try to make the most of their new life. But Janai isn't sure this can be called life. While Janai rushes around the city, Riley finishes building his wind turbine in the yard. Time passes. The couple continues to walk around the island, and Riley continues to photograph Janai. One day he takes her to a waterfall and says that water is always alive. It flows, freezes, melts, and flows again. Life tries. There is no yesterday or tomorrow here. There is only today. They need to try to understand this and survive. But Janai interrupts his musings with a kiss. Later they return to the house, and Janai notices that the water is running out. She washes the dishes in a basin while Riley goes to sleep. Suddenly she notices an email on the laptop. Janai opens it with trepidation and cries when she realizes it's a photo from Riley. Morning comes. Riley goes to the kitchen where a large envelope addressed to him is lying on the table. He connects his water system and opens the envelope. Inside are printed photos of Janai, but the girl herself is nowhere to be found, and this worries Riley. He rushes out to find her, visiting all the places they liked. Meanwhile, his system starts working, and water flows into the house without the need for electricity. Riley continues to drive around the island and finally finds Janai's body floating in a geothermal pool. Realizing that she did this voluntarily, he at first also wants to end his life and jumps into the water, but soon he resurfaces and climbs out. Riley cries as he sits by her body, then lays her on the grass, not knowing what to do now. Then he simply leaves, abandoning the girl by the pool. Riley gets into the car, drives onto the road, and drives for a long time without holding the wheel. But gradually his hands lower onto the steering wheel, and he firmly grips it as if deciding to keep living. The film is called bokeh, the blurred parts of a photograph that the photographer uses to highlight other parts of the image that they consider more significant. The director similarly highlights the main contrast, the two diametrically opposed positions of the last people on Earth. The man immediately accepts the situation as it is and intends to live on, while the woman falls into depression and begins to search for the meaning of what happened. So what chance does humanity have for rebirth under such circumstances? In a small provincial town in Pennsylvania, life flows peacefully and calmly. Milton Robinson, a 79-year-old widower and one of its citizens, leads the life of a simple retiree. He regularly attends town council meetings where he always raises the same issues about changing the town's slogan and installing an additional pedestrian crosswalk near his home. One summer morning after presenting his proposals, as usual, Milton heads home. He spends his day with his daily chores, has dinner, and goes to bed. In the morning, he waters his azaleas and feeds the birds. Later, his adult daughter Denise comes to help him with his monthly bills. There's no news from his elder son Tim, as he lives far away and rarely calls. After finishing their business, Denise goes to the restroom and finds a jar of peas there. She's concerned about her father's well-being, and even though Milton assures her he's fine, she suggests he see a neurologist for a checkup. After all, the man is quite old, and forgetfulness could be a sign of approaching dementia. However, Milton vehemently opposes seeing any doctors. Denise goes to work, leaving the old man alone with his beloved detective shows and a solitary dinner. One night he suddenly hears a commotion in his backyard, and going outside, he sees a flying saucer that has landed awkwardly. Milton calls the rescue service, but they remind him that joking with such a serious organization is a matter for the authorities. They no longer answer his calls, so he dials Denise's number, but she is unavailable. After a restless night, he heads to the town council meeting, where as always he talks about the slogan and the crosswalk. At night, the old man hears strange sounds from the backyard, goes out to see what else has happened, and finds an injured extraterrestrial being in his patio. Once again, he tries to reach his daughter, but Denise, as always, is unreachable. He leaves a voicemail and waits for a call, but it's all in vain. The next morning, as usual, he attends the meeting. His friend Sandy this time proposes a new project for interacting with the youth. She has put up posters around the town and would be delighted if someone came to listen to her stories and advice. She is eager to be part of the lives of lonely young people who need friends. When it's Milton's turn, he starts with the town's motto and the crosswalk as usual, but after that he talks about the UFO that ruined his flowers and broke the bird feeder. However, nobody believes him, considering it the ramblings of an elderly man. Two active retirees, Sandy and Joyce, advise Milton not to bring up this topic at the meeting anymore, or else no one will take the suggestions of the elderly townspeople seriously. Sandy suggests giving the old man a ride home and reminds him that she is always nearby and he can count on her help. Milton becomes angry, realizing that he is being taken for a lunatic. That evening, Milton checks his backyard again to see the extraterrestrial being whom he had thought was dead, but the creature suddenly raises its head and looks at him plaintively. Milton wraps the unconscious extraterrestrial in a blanket again and leaves a glass of water for it. In the morning, he finds the extraterrestrial wrapped in a blanket and seemingly shivering at his back door. Milton invites it inside since it's warmer in the house. He doesn't know what to do because he has never experienced anything like this before. The old man notices that the visitor has drunk all the water, so he brings another glass. Then he prepares a tray with various foods he finds in his house, but the extraterrestrial chooses only an apple. So, Milton goes to the store to buy apples, explaining to the cashier that it's for an extraterrestrial. The cashier treats him like a crazy person with delusions. Upon returning home, Milton sits on the couch in the living room and hears news about the search for a crashed weather satellite, but doesn't pay it much attention because he is startled by the sudden appearance of the extraterrestrial. Seeing that it's feeling much better and can even walk, the old man shows the extraterrestrial all the amenities and settles it in his home, providing a guest room and introducing it to television. Personally, he prefers detective shows because you never know how they will end. Milton shows photos of his family to the silent but attentive extraterrestrial. Unfortunately, his wife is no longer with them. His son has moved to California and his daughter visits him occasionally. Then the old man remembers the dance show and sits in front of the TV, inviting the extraterrestrial to join. On that day, the store clerk tells Denise about her father's strange statements about the extraterrestrial, and she goes to visit him during her lunch break. Milton meets her at the door, and as always, she insists on him seeing a doctor because she is very concerned about his mental health. Milton reluctantly agrees. Denise rushes off, and as soon as she leaves, the phone rings. It's Sandy, urgently needing a printer, and Milton invites her to come over and print the necessary documents. The woman arrives, and upon entering, sees the extraterrestrial. Milton introduces them to each other and shows the crash site. The woman is shocked, but tells Milton that they must keep this a secret for his own safety. She mentions how she has seen on TV how authorities treat poor extraterrestrials, and he shouldn't let anyone into his home except her. Sandy leaves, but Joyce has already noticed her car outside Milton's house and becomes curious about what's happening. Meanwhile, on TV, calls continue for the population to search for the crashed satellite. Time passes, and the extraterrestrial continues to stay in Milton's house, watching his favorite shows together. One morning, it brings Milton a piece of paper with a drawing of a cat on it. This touches Milton's heart, as the little one has drawn him a picture. He finds the extraterrestrial working on repairing its spaceship, apparently having fully recovered and getting ready to go back home. Soon, Milton visits a neurologist and undergoes tests, making some frustrating mistakes in some of them. During this time, Sandy stays with the extraterrestrial and complains to it about her daughter, who moved to the West Coast and lives with her friend. She is very upset that her daughter doesn't visit and doesn't bring her only grandchild. Meanwhile, the doctor, upon learning about Milton's forgetfulness and his stories about extraterrestrials, concludes that his abilities are deteriorating rapidly and suggests considering outside assistance for him. This greatly upsets Milton, and he angrily leaves after shouting at his daughter. Sandy, setting aside the children's book she was reading to the extraterrestrial, tries to ask questions, but the old man goes to his room. Later, he finds the extraterrestrial by its spaceship and complains about his daughter, who wants to put him in a nursing home. He hasn't been in touch with his son, and it seems he was a bad father. The extraterrestrial listens very attentively to the old man, putting down its tools. After this, Milton leaves a voicemail for his son, telling him about his life and Denise's affairs, hoping that he will find it interesting. The next day, Sandy brings a t-shirt for the extraterrestrial as she thinks it's uncomfortable for it to be naked. She also suggests giving it a name, Jules. Milton gets irritated by what he considers silly suggestions but eventually agrees with his friend. Meanwhile, Joyce, upon hearing about the government's offer of a reward for information about the crashed satellite, goes to Milton's house and, looking through the window, sees the extraterrestrial. Now she is also in on Milton's secret and suggests naming the extraterrestrial Harry. Sandy suggests to Milton that he should acknowledge the fact that Joyce is joining their group, even though he's ready to kill the overly curious lady. Then she shows pictures of cats that Jules has drawn for him. Joyce speculates that Jules is trying to communicate something to the old man since all the drawings are of cats. However, Milton refuses to believe it. Meanwhile, the government receives numerous calls about various anomalies. One day, a woman complains about a man who spends hours staring at his rocket in the yard. FBI agents go to the given address but find a homemade rocket and a happy man next to it. At the same time, Joyce visits Milton to spend time with the extraterrestrial. She also gives it a t-shirt and offers it apples. During this time, Sandy receives a call from a young man who was interested in her posters. He comes to her house and the joyful woman invites him for tea. While Joyce talks to the extraterrestrial about her life in the big city, where she even performed in concerts because she sang well, Sandy engages in conversation with the guest and Joyce suggests singing for the extraterrestrial. While she does that, the young man asks for permission to use Sandy's restroom, but when she follows him upstairs, she sees him stealing her jewelry. After she threatens to call the police, the man attacks her and tries to strangle her. However, the extraterrestrial has a vision of the events and telepathically makes the man's head explode. This raises suspicions at the FBI, who are conducting the search for the crashed spaceship. Responding to police questions, Sandy suddenly realizes who saved her from certain death and rushes to Milton's house. She hugs Jules and tearfully thanks him for saving her life. The retirees discuss the potential danger of the extraterrestrial, but conclude that it's only dangerous to bad people. Meanwhile, the FBI agents can't understand how and from what the head of the criminal could have burst, so they decide to keep an eye on Sandy. On this day, Denise meets the elderly folks at the store and again brings up the topic of the apples Milton bought. However, Milton avoids the conversation. Later, the group has lunch at Milton's house when Sandy notices a strange smell. When they go outside, they discover a dead cat that Jules apparently brought there. Connecting all the facts, the retirees realize that the extraterrestrial needs cats for some reason, and now there are not 7, as in the picture, but 6. Milton calls Denise, hoping to find out where she disposes of the deceased cats in her clinic, which frightens her completely. Not receiving a clear answer, Milton and Sandy decide to drive around the streets of the town since cats often meet their fate under car wheels. On the road, Milton inquires about Sandy's husband's illness, which eventually led to his passing, and she talks about being left alone. She starts asking questions, reassuring that life must go on. However, at this point, Milton asks her to stop the car, and the FBI agents become witnesses as the elderly couple loads a deceased cat into the trunk. That day, they find 2 more cats, and Joyce promises to find the rest. Meanwhile, FBI agents eavesdrop on the private conversations of Milton's close ones and hear Denise telling her brother about her father's eccentricities. At this moment, Joyce brings 3 more cats she found in different parts of the town. Only one is missing. Just then, agents knock on the door, but the elderly folks hide and don't open it. The men eventually leave, and the people realize they need to act quickly. And then, Milton remembers Joyce's deaf, blind, and non-mobile cat. Offended, she leaves, but Sandy catches up with her and apologizes for Milton's bluntness. Joyce admits that he's right. It's long past time to end the suffering of the cat. She brings the animal, and the extraterrestrial puts it to eternal sleep. Then it covers the remains with some material, and they start to merge into a single object. In the end, a glowing object appears in front of the group, which serves as fuel for Jules's spaceship. The saucer lifts off into the air and moves to the center of the yard, which is instantly detected by the FBI's instruments. The retirees understand that the time for farewell has come. Joyce gives Jules a souvenir globe with a view of the city inside. Sandy gives him a sweater she knitted, and Milton gives him his driver's license with a photo. But the extraterrestrial suddenly makes an inviting gesture, clearly offering them to join, and Milton suddenly decides to accept the invitation. But then the phone rings in the house, and picking up the receiver he hears Denise's voice. She suggests meeting on Saturday. They'll have lunch and then she'll give him a haircut because they've been arguing, and that's not right. At that moment, agents knock on the door. Milton rushes into the yard, and they only manage to see the departing saucer, where 3 Earthlings joined in the last moment. The ship lands not far from the town to safely disembark the elderly and bid them a peaceful farewell. Milton hugs the extraterrestrial and thanks it for the invitation to travel together, but he can't leave his home and loved ones behind. Jules enters the spaceship and flies away while the elderly folks wave goodbye to him. Time passes. Milton continues to live in his home, visited by Sandy and Joyce. The elderly often reminisce about Jules' Harry and hope that he hasn't forgotten them either. And one night, Milton's yard is illuminated by a bright light, and the old man realizes that he has guests. A light, heartwarming, and slightly melancholic film about the fading of human life. It's good that amid the plethora of recently produced nonsense, there are still such heartfelt and warm movies in which an extraterrestrial is not a villain who came to Earth to conquer it, but rather a cute and understanding silent being with expressive eyes. The next day, Faraday records a message to his wife. He explains that on Earth they would be called a family, and their children would be real children and not dolls. It seems as though he's beginning to understand what emotions are. Drones on Antea have no right to choose, but on Earth the range of choices is astounding. There can be dozens of varieties of just coffee. Even children can choose. Humans create rituals out of simple actions. For example, the ritual of family dining or talking to God. And during meals, people share their day's events. They also experience a sense of joy which Faraday wishes to experience with his wife. Each generation here produces a handful of great minds. Justin is one of them. The number of emotions experienced by people in a day is absurd. And everyone around Faraday lives in fear of some kind. The fear of failure leads Clay to meet with Fate. After a tough conversation, he still pleads for another week, as Faraday was almost done building the device. Faraday then continues to explain that on Earth, everyone has their own self, but on Antea, they're born either as knowers or drones, but here, everyone creates themselves. And people also believe in something higher, that is, in God. One day, Josiah suddenly cuts off a conversation about synthesis and leaves the table, and this marks the beginning of his changes. Then a man plays a jazz record explaining what it is and how it originated. While improvisation was inexplicable, Faraday tries to explain it to his wife. Meanwhile, Elizabeth tells Clay that the signal in the tornado came from somewhere in Southeast Asia. Also, the stewardess on the plane, Faraday, was posted about it afterwards. After seeing Clay off, Elizabeth calls someone on the phone and asks for a meeting. At this time, Eddie informs his brother about the desire of oil magnate Thorne to buy half of the Origin Corporation. In London, Josiah notices a music store. He then picks up a guitar and starts playing, astonishing the salesman, but suddenly the man faints. Justin finds him in the hospital, and although doctors were sure everything was fine, Faraday tells how Josiah was born in the Bahamas and turned his genius to music in his youth. But his wife left him after their daughter was born, and the alien confesses that she shared his DNA with the old man, which is now rewriting Josiah's human genome, and what he will turn into is unknown. Josiah then leaves the house and goes to a bridge. There he finds a wasp nest and stares at it for a long time, and upon returning home, starts writing an endless equation. The doctor arrives and announces that his blood oxygen level is elevated. Justin blames everything on Faraday, but suddenly, Faraday realizes that Josiah translated his daughter's equation into sound frequencies and wrote a song, the key to the synthesis process. He sets up a keyboard instrument in front of the device and asks Josiah to play its melody. Well, the man begins to play, and gradually, by changing frequencies and tempo, he manages to activate the device. Faraday joins him, and everything works out. Well, that night, Elizabeth takes Josiah's medical chart from the doctor and reports of Clay about Faraday's successful experiment. Looking at the test results, she figures out that Newton is in Cambodia, where a cement bunker can be seen in the middle of the jungle. Clay informs Finch about this, and she forbids him to go there. But the agent sends a special force team to Cambodia. The soldiers enter the building, which turns out to be empty, but inside they find unknown plants whose dust kills them. Clay watches this in horror through a mirror screen. Meanwhile, Molly asks her family to help her with an assignment and create a family tree. But they have no photos, so Faraday draws a very similar family portrait, to which Molly asks to add him. At this time, Hutch and Eddie attend the presentation of the new oncology center of the Magni, born because Eddie is obsessed with the idea of using it to protect against the CIA. Clay's people try to understand what happened in the bunker of Cambodia, and Elizabeth finds power lines laid out of the bunker, but can't yet track exactly where. Josiah notices that the fingerprints are disappearing from his fingers, and he hears synapses forming in his brain, and realizes that he's becoming an Anthean. At Eddie's estates, a meeting begins attended by Clay. Justin realizes that he is not a scientist at all and starts suspecting that something is not right. She doesn't want Faraday to fall into the hands of those who tore Newton apart. And later, Finch reprimands Clay for the soldiers' deaths and orders him to fly to Washington. Realizing that their work could be blocked by the CIA, Justin leaves, and Faraday activates the system, calling Newton to start asking questions. He doesn't understand why the launch was delayed, as it's fatal for Antea. Newton, impressed with his rebirth, advises learning to lie. To outsmart the CIA, he must make himself a legend, as Fame could not be killed. Newton disconnects, and Elizabeth, rushing into the laboratory, fails to see anything. Thinking it over, Faraday suggests making their work public, as the CIA loves silence. Hutch arranges a meeting with a journalist friend, and Faraday talks about a new energy source and the CIA's threat to freeze the project. Eddie learns that a man named Clay emerged from a witness protection program. Clay at the moment tries to explain himself to a committee and shows an order signed by Finch and talks about the tape of Newton's interrogation. The woman is shocked, as she did not expect much treachery from her protege. Clay gets a permission to continue the case. Elizabeth shows Justin camera footage from Cambodia, but Newton was not there, even though the bunker was sending a signal into space. Apparently, the alien was talking to his people and warns that Clay will never allow the machine to be taken unless they catch Newton. Justin tells Faraday about the soldiers' deaths, but he doesn't believe that Newton could have killed people. That night, Clay comes to Eddie and tells her that he and his mother came to America from Russia, but the woman turned out to be a terrorist. She blew up the building where she worked, abandoning her son to fate. That's when Finch found and adopted him, and he doesn't know where his real mom is now. And he destroyed his foster mother today, and meanwhile, Faraday also finds the Cambodian recordings and hears Newton's signal to Antea. He admits to Justin that Newton deceived everyone, and he never intended to return home because he wanted to bring the Antheans here. But he, Faraday, promises to do everything to save Earth. Newton transmits the signals intercepted by the CIA, but they cannot decrypt them. Justin is sure that the machine will still be taken, so she asks her friend to take Molly away. They then rush to the laboratory, and Elizabeth immediately reports this to Clay. Faraday dismantles the machine, gives the core to Justin, orders her and Josiah to leave, and stays in the laboratory. The pair barely manage to avoid Clay and his henchmen, and agents burst into the laboratory where they are met by Faraday. But after driving away, Justin decides to return for the alien, and in the laboratory, Faraday, seeing the agent, detonates a gas cylinder. Later, a stunned Clay sees Josiah carrying Faraday away, but is unable to stop it. Faraday regains consciousness and names Mary's phone number. Justin calls her and drives to the monastery. The sister immediately orders the preparation of the operating room and instructs to hide the device. It turns out that Faraday lost a lot of blood, but first the bullet must be removed. When Mary cuts the skin, strange tentacles jump out of the alien's body, frightening the sisters. But Mary assures them that he is an angel. Hutch receives an offer to sell his part of Origin for a large sum. Although he doesn't understand why Magnate Thorne would want a blown-up laboratory, he agrees. In the monastery, Mary sets up women on lookout posts, and Josiah announces that he's ready to give his blood to Faraday, convincing the sisters that he's a Nephilim, half angel, half human. Clay's people search Justin's house, and Elizabeth finds a clue but reports it to her mysterious contacts. At the time in the monastery, Mary confesses to Justin that she got Newton addicted to alcohol, thus ruining his life. Therefore, she asks Justin to do everything to save Faraday as she loves him, although she doesn't yet realize it. In the meantime, Clay's assistant traces a call from Justin and the agents and learns their location. Mary begins a blood transfusion operation from Josiah to Faraday. Clay's agents rush to the monastery, while Elizabeth warns someone that the alien has been found. Meanwhile, to buy time to complete the operation, the sisters and Mary arm themselves and fend off against the agents. A shootout begins, and Clay demands the surrender of the alien, but the sisters stand their ground. However, they run out of bullets, and Mary orders everyone to run while she kneels at the altar. There, Clay finds her, and the woman asks him to say his real name, and he admits that he is Ivan. But the nun corrects him, as his real name is Judas, and the agent shoots her. Hearing the shot, Justin goes into the room and encounters Clay. He orders Faraday, Justin, and the device to be taken, leaving the old man behind. Mary regains consciousness and crawls to the operating room with her last strength. She reaches Josiah's hand and dies happily. Justin's friend and Molly fall into the hands of unknown people. At the same time, Elizabeth warns Clay that they don't have the algorithm to activate the core, and he reports that he has interrogation experience. The alien and Justin are brought to a demolished laboratory and tied to chairs. Seeing Justin being beaten, Faraday confesses that the recorded signal from the tornado is an order for the remaining Antaeans to prepare for flight to Earth. Clay takes Justin to another room and orders Elizabeth to guard while he deals with Faraday. The agents start torturing and demanding to confess when and how the aliens will arrive. Elizabeth asks Justin for the algorithm, but Justin remembers how the girl betrayed her family. She allowed Clay to kill in the monastery, so how is she any better than him? Clay continues the torture, but it had no effect on the alien. And instead, Faraday manages to enrage Clay, claiming that it was Finch who used him and not the other way around. The agent orders water torture, but it turns out to be a gift for Faraday, as he loves the water. Then Elizabeth remembers about the X-ray, and it truly causes Faraday pain, and he starts screaming, which Justin hears. Suddenly, Watt appears before Faraday and advises him to make something up for Clay. Elizabeth notices this and realizes that the alien is losing his mind. Watt, meanwhile, suggests to Faraday that Clay had two families. The alien starts seeing that one family abandoned the boy, and the other he betrayed himself. This turns out to be the boy's eternal pain, and Clay gets angry and shoots Faraday in the leg. Visions of Antea, his family, and the flight flash before the alien, and he gives Clay a vision about the imminent arrival of a ship prepared by Newton. The synthesis machine is the ship's engine, but without Faraday it won't work, and the alien offers Clay to play Russian roulette. And this is because he can entrust synthesis only to someone who won't hesitate to sacrifice themselves for progress. Faraday tells Clay about his biological mother's dossier, which he found on the internet. He'll say where she is if Clay loads a bullet, spins the chamber, and pulls the trigger. The agent will have a chance to ask 5 questions, and if he survives, Faraday will give him the synthesis. The agent agrees to the terms, and they start the game of Russian roulette. Clay asks about the world of Antea. Faraday tells, and the agent pulls the trigger, and he survives. Finally, they get to the main question for Clay about his mother, and the alien confesses that everything with his biological mother was planned and executed by Finch. She was part of a team working on Newton, and she deliberately deprived the boy of his family and took away his name. Clay, driven mad, points the gun at Faraday, but Elizabeth, who enters, shoots first, killing the agent, and she contacts someone and reports that she has Faraday and Justin, and soon people from oil magnate Thorne arrive at the bunker. Molly has been with them for a long time and is safe, and Josiah is also alive, but his illness has returned. All of them are now under Thorne's protection as he sees the future in synthesis. The people are taken to meet the magnate, and in a vine-covered cave where Buddhist monks sit on the floor, they meet Newton. Faraday recalls how on Antea the knowers took seeds from him that was supposed to sprout on Earth. In the present, Faraday expresses outrage over his dissection, but Newton draws attention to the surrounding vegetation. He had given the monks Antea seeds in exchange for shelter and permission to observe their prayers. This area is a complete magnetic anomaly, which is why satellites see nothing and the CIA cannot find him. Therefore, no one could spot the huge spaceship that Newton built. He shows the ship to Faraday, who realizes that only the knowers should come to Earth. Faraday's shocked because it was the knowers who made all the decisions that led to Antea's demise, and the drones just followed their orders. But now it's the knowers who must perish. Justin also realizes that after the arrival of the knowers, humans will become drones, and after all, the reborn Josiah stopped experiencing emotions and began to prioritize efficiency over love. Newton insists that only the merging of races will give Earth a chance to survive, but Justin is adamantly against it. She refuses to unlock the device algorithm, which she altered before fleeing the laboratory. She leaves, and Newton forces his student to learn the algorithm, as he's destined to be the one who will greet the aliens on Earth and prevent their killing. This is because he will become a legend after becoming the head of the Origin Corporation. Faraday demands to take his family on the ship, but Newton advises forgetting about them and staying Justin. He doesn't want to see drones on Earth. Faraday was wrongly classified as a servant because he always asks questions. Faraday finds Justin, who's disappointed in him, and demands to be taken home, but he couldn't do that until he learns the algorithm. He confesses that it was she and her family who taught him to love. Justin gives in and goes home, and they again live in their old house. Josiah's illness has returned, and the woman is disappointed, but her father reminds her of faith, which will help them endure everything. 3 months later, Elizabeth visits Justin, and the woman confesses that she betrayed them for money. But now the CIA will take revenge on her and sooner or later kill her. But before that, they will take Faraday, and Elizabeth gives her cross to Justin and asks her for forgiveness, and Justin reveals to her Thorne's identity. Later, she accidentally finds Faraday's device, which alerts her to an approaching tornado. Justin follows its directions and enters the hurricane's eye. Meanwhile, news reports broadcast a man ready to share a new type of energy with the world. In the evening, in a huge theater, Faraday appears on stage and he begins to talk about everything that happened. Simultaneously, agents head to Justin and Hutch's home. At the theater, a sniper targets Faraday, but he pulls out the synthesis box, forcing the sniper to stop. Faraday is brought to Finch, and he refuses to answer until he sees Justin and Hutch. Although Finch is sure that she is one, the couple is brought in. Then Faraday reminds them that the controlling stake in the new enterprise now belongs to Justin and Hutch, and without their consent, no one can do anything with the device. Faraday will fly to Antea and bring back the remaining people of his planet to Earth. Finch threatens all three with imprisonment, and in response, Faraday announces that in 12 hours, the blueprints for quantum synthesis will appear on the internet, and people will get it for free, and the USA will no longer be the world's owner. Finch threatens Justin's family, but Justin reminds her that against the system is the entire population of Earth, and now the CIA will have to worry about their safety. Later, Faraday comes to Newton, who admits that he's proud of him. Later, Faraday visits Josiah to return his hat and thank him for showing him his paternal love. He says goodbye to Molly, teaching her Antean gestures, and she gives him a logo figurine. The hardest moment for him arrives saying goodbye to Justin, and he will bring his family there, although they might not recognize him now. But the woman is sure that everything will be as it should be. Faraday prepares for departure, while Molly and Justin plant Anthea's seeds near their house. And at night, they watch the launch from a distant star. At times very naive, at times deep and subtle, with philosophy, with reflections on family values, but overall, lovers of science fiction should really enjoy it. The day comes when scientists in one of the biotechnology laboratories begin to clone famous personalities for very large fees, of course. In fact, many rich people would like to have a child of a genius like Vivaldi, Galileo, or Michelangelo. Soon, however, people decide to take a swing at something far more valuable, God himself. After Lucifer rebelled against the power of God in heaven, he was defeated by the archangel Michael, and flaming meteor was thrown into the underworld, where he had to remain in chains and punishing flames. Michael himself chained him to a rock and cried out to return as a humble angel, to which Lucifer replied that he would rather reign in hell than serve in paradise, and he threatened that he would return as ruler of the world. Over time, Lucifer was joined by numerous demons as he craved revenge. Meanwhile, on Earth, Lucifer's disciples set up a temple at the site of his fall into the abyss, and they believe that one day he will return to rule on Earth. Our time. Laura Milton, an American student, is trying to persuade her professor to accept her thesis on the theme that there are no evil or good spirits, but he refuses, offering to discuss the subject in an intimate setting. But now the girl refuses. At the same time, a rare exhibition begins at the museum, the Shroud of Turin, which contains the DNA of Jesus and is a record of the fact of his resurrection. Everything is on display. Laura enters the museum after receiving a pass, a badge from a priest she knows. Marconi explains that Christ was wrapped in the shroud the day he died, but that when he rose from the dead, his body shone so brightly that his imprint remained on the cloth. Thus, the shroud is a picture of Jesus. The priest then escorts Laura to the statue of the Archangel Michael, who has been brought to the museum to guard the shroud. The War of the Angels was the first war and the first evil, but Laura disagrees. Evil is not an external mystical force, it is a personality, and when trouble happens to loved ones, it is foolish to blame the devil. But Marconi is sure that only Michael stands between the devil and men. There are many prophecies that Lucifer will return, but the father hopes that he will not find a way out. The priest leaves to go about his business, and Laura gets comfortable and begins to draw. Suddenly, she hears her name, but no one is around. She calms down and continues to work. It's evening and the gallery is about to close. The last group of tourists enters the museum, and while the guard is distracted for a moment, a figure in a black cloak separates from the group and makes his way through a side door. Despite the late hour, Laura is still working when she thinks Lucifer's head on the statue is moving, followed by the cry of a raven. The girl walks to the window without noticing the sinister figure behind her, who pulls a sword from Michael's hand and walks away. Laura closes the window and gathers her things. The guard is ready to escort her out, but she refuses. She still has to see Padre Marconi. She goes to the chapel and sees a figure in black slaying the guard with a sword. The girl runs away in terror and hides in the confessional, watching as the woman with the sword breaks the glass over the shroud. Padre Marconi arrives at the noise and in the name of Saint Michael demands that the sacrilege cease, but the woman throws him aside and pierces him with her sword. Laura moves carelessly and the villain notices her. She orders her underlings to take the shroud and the girl, hoping that he might like her. The bandits leave while the mortally wounded priest summons the Archangel Michael to occupy his body and defeat his enemies. Immediately, a luminous whirlwind descends from the heavens and the father comes to life. He tries to catch up with the villains, but they drive away. The plot is moved to a private auction where one of the scientists, Dr. Laurent, explains that he has managed to create a procedure by which he can grow babies from the DNA of great men, thus resurrecting the most prominent figures in the history of mankind. And as proof, he presents the reincarnation of the great Vivaldi and his proud parents. The next lot, he presents the new Michelangelo Buonarroti, and the whole rises in a burst of delight. The bidding begins when a woman in black appears in the gallery and beckons to the doctor. He rushes to her call. The pair travel to the devil's castle where the doctor sees the shroud. At last, Lucifer will have a decent home. Meanwhile, Laura is dragged into some room where several girls are already sitting in chains. All of them are horrified by what is happening and do not understand why they are there. A few men enter, take a blood test and photograph Laura, while Father Marconi, or rather the Archangel Michael in his body, makes his way to the guard room where two monks are watching the murder videos. Seeing the one who was murdered in front of them alive, they are astonished as he finds out where the keepers of the shroud were and how could they have allowed this to happen. It is explained to him that the cardinal responsible for everything is not himself at the moment. He sees secret cults and the devil's minions. And now he is in the asylum of Saint Michael. Archangel takes the car keys and drives to the cardinal's house, while the doctor isolates DNA from the blood traces on the shroud. The old cardinal meets Michael with a gun and upon learning of what has happened becomes enraged. He warned them, but looking into the man's eyes he realizes he is not Marconi. The cardinal shows Michael Lucifer's castle and suggests that his minions intend to revive him. He reminds him the scriptures say that one day the devil will be freed from his chains and will rise from the underworld. Apparently the time has come. Two monsters are responsible for his release, a woman and an underground monster. But only Michael himself, or God, can set Lucifer free. The devil's minions have offered him the bodies of virgins for centuries to get a vessel for the devil, but human bodies are too weak. Although there was one woman in history who was able to bear and give birth to a son of God. And today science is ready to open the gates to the devil using Christ's DNA. Michael asks to be taken to the castle. Meanwhile, the girls try to devise an escape plan and share their experiences. It turns out that Laura's husband and son are dead. Instruments inform the doctor of a successful DNA extraction, and the walls in the underworld begin to crumble, heralding the devil's release, while the doctor informs Liz of a complete match of all the right parameters with Laura's body. And the women wait for the attendants to arrive and pounce on them. It seems that they will succeed, but another group rushes to the rescue and the girls are dragged into the laboratory. They are laid on tables and despite desperate resistance, fertilized eggs are injected into their bodies. Liz convinces Laura to put up with it, for Lucifer is bound to like her. In the meantime, Cardinal escorts Michael to the entrance to the dungeon and warns of caution. A monster awaits ahead. At this time, the devil's minions gather in the hall with the well. Two impregnated girls are tied to a pillar in the center, and the monster who has come out takes them and leads them to the gateway to the underworld. The girls are put in an iron cage and lowered down while Lucifer is already waiting for them. Sensing the approach of the possible Holy Mothers, he removes their collars and, transformed into a luminous stream, rushes towards them. The women are seized by the subterranean monsters and the stream enters one of them, but her body fails and she dies. Then the glowing worm enters Laura's body. Liz and the servants greet the living woman with delight. The choice is made. She is escorted into a glass cage where it is explained that her child will be the new Jesus. Meanwhile, Michael sneaks inside the castle and, having obtained a guard's uniform, finds the shroud and tries to find Laura. The doctor enters, but Michael rejects him and sets fire to the laboratory. He finds Laura, but the woman realizes it is not her longtime friend. She runs away. The Archangel has to run after her. He manages to drag her into a storage room where he explains who he is and finds out exactly what was being done to the woman. The couple escapes when Liz is informed that the shroud is missing. She gives an order to detain Laura at all costs, and the guards rush in after her. Laura and Michael in the meantime try to hide from the underground monster in narrow passages, but it catches up with them and attacks the Archangel. And while he wages a hard fight, Laura is grabbed by the guards. The enraged woman threatens Liz to kill herself and the child, and she orders her to be taken to a cell. Meanwhile, Michael is captured and put on a chain in the dungeon while Laura is tied to a bed. Liz is willing to do anything to keep the baby. After gathering all his strength, Michael breaks the chains and frees himself, while the castle guards search for the shroud hidden in the dungeon. The monster manages to see the archangel descend into the underworld. After reaching the bottom, he's attacked by the imprisoned souls and discovers that Lucifer has been freed and his sword is missing. Then the demon of greed, Mammon, flies to him and announces that they will soon close the gate and Michael will remain here instead of Lucifer, and he scoffs at his foolishness to come down in a mortal body. The archangel is chained to the rock with Lucifer's sword. Laura meanwhile sees her child in an ultrasound, and he suddenly calls out her name. The woman wakes up terrified and sees Liz nearby, who finds out what Lucifer told her, and then tells the story of a brave warrior and a tyrant who were equals. But the tyrant wanted the warrior to be his slave, but he refused, and soon he would rise up and join the fight. Laura speaks unflatteringly of the demon, for which she is slapped in the face. After which Liz explains the transformation happening to her body by the need to make it comfortable for the divine child. But the woman doesn't want to accept her imposed role as the mother of an incomprehensible creature. Meanwhile, the people who were given to Lucifer come to Michael, pronouncing the oath, "Saved one, saved all," and questioning him about his origins. Discovering that it is Michael himself, they demand proof, but Michael needs a sword. At this point, they are attacked by demons. The men flee. Laura is again visited by the worm Lucifer, who goes inside her. He speaks to her and convinces her to give birth to the baby he wants, after which she can do what she wants, even kill Liz. The woman calms down and sees herself with the baby in her arms. But one day she frees herself and terribly mutilates the guards and escapes from the ward. When she sees the consequences of her actions, she is horrified. What has been done to her? She manages to make her way to a warehouse, and after locking herself inside, she drinks a canister of chlorine. Liz finds it and promises that soon Lucifer will consume her completely, and then she will find peace. But then Laura suddenly gains unprecedented strength, grabs the hated Liz, and spews the contents of her stomach on her. From Laura's womb, Lucifer himself begins to speak to Liz and demands that the woman be killed as soon as he is born, and to destroy all who knows of what is happening. Laura is imprisoned in a glass sarcophagus to prevent any further attempts to kill the child, and Lucifer returns to the underworld where he sees Michael and taunts him. He offers an alliance that no one will be able to defeat, but the archangel refuses to support the rebel. He thanks Michael for his new home, the body of Jesus himself, which will be his own. Lucifer flies away, and the archangel suddenly realizes this is not at all what he thought. It is not the devil but God who has chosen Laura. She will give birth to Christ, not the devil's vessel. He asks the people to bring his sword, but the demons are close and the sword is heavy. But two men risk their lives to bring the weapon, and Michael is set free. He dispels the demons and promises to return for his saviors. Michael returns to Earth and finds the shroud. Then he goes to Laura's sarcophagus. He is horrified to see her change and tries to tell her that this child is not evil at all. It is he who will defeat the devil. But Laura gets out and throws Michael away. Then she stands over him and tells him that the waters are already breaking. Searing jets pour out on the archangel and he screams in pain. Losing his strength, Laura places Michael in her lap and demands that he kneel. He refuses and the woman sinks her fingers into his neck. With the last of his strength, Michael promises that the devil will not be able to control the child. He is the one who will defeat Lucifer because the blood of Christ does not flow and good is always stronger than evil. Enraged, Laura throws Michael aside and begins to destroy everything around her. But then the birth begins. The devil's followers gather in the castle courtyard while Liz takes the born baby away. Laura is thrown down the well and the monster takes a chain with a sharp tip and goes into the courtyard. Liz brings the baby out and shows it to the assembled people. The end of God's tyranny has come. She orders the people to kneel and calls upon Lucifer to receive the baptism of blood. At the same moment, the monster begins to spin his terrible weapon, crushing everyone in the courtyard. At this time, Michael comes to his senses and goes out into the yard as the doctor kisses the baby and dies under the blows. Liz carries the baby away, and Michael finds Laura, who has managed to hold onto the edge of the well, and pulls her out. The pair catch up with Liz's car, and while Laura picks up her baby, Michael calls him the god who chose his mother. He asks the woman to find the cardinal and goes to the well himself. He seals the entrance to the underworld where all the demons of hell have rushed, but the master rejects him and opens the gates again. And then Michael detonates the explosives he set earlier. The castle explodes to the great joy of the cardinal. A bit later, the cardinal and Laura with the child in her arms come to the temple and return the shroud, and Michael descends into the underworld and frees the people who believed in him. After a while, Liz observes Cardinal and Laura with a grown boy walking through the woods, and she calls the baby Lucifer, and he turns around and shows a dark jet showing out of his nose. Then he turns away. Pretty unusual film which raises the themes of the struggle between good and evil but viewed through the prism of the scientific achievements of our time. And some doubts arise as to whether man truly understands what he is really doing.